Rise for attention, Chair.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Your Worship.
Please be seated. Welcome, one and all. It's just great to have some people in the gallery for a change. I think we're all assembled here to help celebrate Barry Cooper's birthday, if I'm not mistaken. So, happy birthday, sir. See, I know everything. And so welcome. So first item of business, Madam Clerk.
Roll call, Your Worship. I've taken the roll and all members of council are present.
You. Next item, please.
A motion to adopt this evening's agenda, Your Worship.
Moved by Councillor Cullen, seconded by Councillor Parker. Any changes or additions? Seeing none, we'll call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Confirmation of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held May 2nd.
Moved by Councillor Cameron, seconded by Councillor Frangi. Any errors or omissions? Also seeing none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Next item, please.
Under the order of presentations, Your Worship, we have Emeka Eggison from Brandon Downtown Development Corporation with respect to the Princess Priority Sites Tax Increment Financing Bylaw.
Very good. Welcome and come on ahead.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. So Your Lordship, the councillors and members of the administration here, I am excited to be here to talk to you guys about this very important project in the downtown that we know will bring forth development. So when I resumed my role as the Executive Director for Brandon Downtown Development Corporation, I noticed that the excitement that was built as a result of the BU project, that it wasn't there any longer because it was cancelled. And me and some stakeholders in the city, we decided to make something happen on this project. So we spent a lot of time talking to stakeholders in the community about what we can actually do with that property. So we spoke to developers, we spoke to real estate agents, and with the offer that we had at that point, nobody was willing to take on that project. We all know that developers and real estate agents, they are not Father Christmas, right? They are in the game to be able to make some money from the project. So they didn't want to accept it. In fact, my former boss told me that why will I build something in the downtown when I can go anywhere else in the city and develop a property and get a quick return on investment on my property. So he wasn't willing to touch it. And basically the reason was because of the huge financial gap needed to make something happen on that property. So BDDC owns some portions of that land, and to some extent I can confidently say that we are majority owners of that land. So during our board meeting today and subsequently before, we have agreed as a board that we need something to happen with that property. And the board of directors agreed that we might need to sell those portions of land at $1 and probably include the municipal portion of taxes to make that project happen. And that project, we believe, will actually be in accordance with our downtown plan. So what do we need to see in the downtown? We need to see a high-density mixed-use housing aligned with long-term growth, first-floor commercial, you have mobility parks, public realm, office uses, with a focus on commercial corridors. So this project will spur change and new investments in the downtown because we've been able to discuss with the stakeholders, and they agree that for something to happen on those property, the city council and other stakeholders need to go beyond the status quo. to make things happen. So this project will help us with our revitalization goals, which is diversity, uniqueness, and character. So for something to happen in the downtown, we need this project to actually be successful. So today we are here to partner with the City of Brandon and other stakeholders to help facilitate the development of the Princess Development Site. We believe that this project will create a mixed-use community and will be able to leverage land value for the rejuvenation to new prosperity for the entire neighborhood. So like I spoke before, there are challenges to making something happen on that land. There are significant costs that needs to be handled, not by the developers, but maybe by us. And also, if you look at the lease, the vacancy rate, it doesn't allow people to invest and quickly get a good return on investment. So because of this, we have limited number of qualified and willing developers. So if we are able to sell those lands, market it at $1, and include a municipal portion for the taxes through a tax increment financing, we believe that we'll be able to attract people to be able to do something on that land. It's going to create a momentum that will affect other properties that we see in the downtown. For example, let me give you an example of how one project can help other projects. If you look at the Bonds Mendel building, just because of that project that happened there, we've noticed that we actually have 2 new persons, 2 new businesses who will be moving into the adjacent locations. And one of the things they said that made them to move to those businesses was because of that investment there. The 902 Ross Avenue location, the 912 Ross Avenue location, those buildings, some of them have been vacant for years, but because of one development, we attracted others. So the same thing will happen when it comes to this project. If something happens here, then it's going to build a good momentum for something to happen in the downtown. So if we want a vibrant town, we have to have a good downtown with projects like this that can help to build momentum. We know that the status quo cannot make anything happen. So we urge the City Council to take a bold approach by approving this TIF, because our organization, BDDC, we believe that we need to offer that additional incentive to make something happen on that property. So what do we prefer? To see that land vacant for another 5, another 10 years? Or do we want something to happen in that property? This is a question that we need to ask ourselves. And as an organization, Emeka Egesin representing BDDC, I believe that selling the land for $1 and coupling it with the tax increment financing, the municipal portion, will help to attract people to want to develop the land. So that's my plea. And I'm coming representing Brandon Downtown Development Corporation and urging you to please consider this and hear our plea, and please grant this municipal TIF so that we can get something going on in the downtown. We need something big, and City Council needs to make a bold statement that they are interested in the downtown. Maybe this is an opportunity for you to show that you are interested in what is happening in the downtown. By doing this, you make a bold statement telling everybody and downtown stakeholders that you are really interested in the future of the downtown. I know all of you here are passionate about the downtown, but we cannot just use words and say those things. We need to start putting our words into action. And I believe that this project is a good one for the City Council to start. So I don't know if you have any questions regarding this project, but like I said before, I come with the full support of BDDC, and I know that if you support this project, then we are on a run to make other good things happen in the downtown.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive and impassioned presentation, Emeka. Thank you for that, and we'll open up the floor for questions if any member of council may have some. You certainly laid it out there pretty well, so we may not have a lot of questions, but I would invite those that may do. Okay, Councillor Cullen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our presenter. What are you, at this point, we're talking about having the land value set at $1 in hopes that we will have some developer that will come and do a project. Now, this project can't just be something small. It has to be 4-story building and commercial on the main floor, those kind of things. So, or a 3-story building. So what type of value are we trying to do as a catalyst with the $1? What value do you see of building being constructed under those specifications? What value would end up being invested downtown?
Yeah, so it will actually achieve two purposes, right? It will help stakeholders know that the city is interested in the downtown. Apart from that, the two approach when it comes to this property involves the commercial and the residential. So we want a mixed-use property there that will actually affect other surrounding buildings. So let me give you an example. From what I know, the city, Brandon Brandon in terms of land mass, the downtown is just about 1 kilometer, right? And 1 kilometer squared, but the property tax it generates is about 13% of the total property taxes in the downtown. So you can imagine the ripple effect is going to have on the property taxes and ultimately the revenue of the city. Because if a project like this happens there, then there is a business there, there are people who live in that property, and they'll be doing businesses in the downtown, they live in the downtown, they'll spend their money in the downtown, and it will affect the property values within the city too. So ultimately, I think it's going to affect the revenue of the city.
Good, thank you. And Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, through your worship, just to assist Emeka there a little bit with Councillor Cullen's question, I think that MNP, who did work on this with the city, was valuing a project like this at somewhere between sort of that $7 to $10 million in investment, private investment. And so of course we're not valuing the land at $1, we're selling it at $1. It's just like if you had the experience of ever selling your car to your kid for $1. It's not valued at $1. It's just that's what it takes to make the transaction. And I appreciate your passionate presentation, and I believe all those things that you're saying to be true. And when you're talking about this, just for clarity's sake, City of Brandon and BDDC own a portion of this property you're looking
Yes.
at. And
yes.
you're of course supportive of the TIF for the whole property.
Yes.
Not just the BDC piece, but the whole property. So just to clarify that.
Thank you. And
Guys, we are not selling the property. That's not how we've not valued the property to $1. We're just using that as an incentive to attract people to get their property. So those properties definitely do not worth $1. but it's just an economic development tool that we feel will make people want to do something on the property.
Thank you, and Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you too, Mecca. Thank you very much for the presentation this evening. I think one question I would have is with regards to the one property, especially the property on 9th Street, dates back to the Renaissance Brandon days when I was involved with Renaissance Brandon and the acquisition of that property. Just for clarity, for council's sake, that is a property that has been attempted to be marketed already at market rate value, right? So BDDC or Renaissance Brandon in the day have taken steps to attempt to sell that property in past at what would be considered market rate. So this is an incentive again, just for our own comfort level, that it has been marketed in the past at market rate, correct?
Yes. And like I said, when I started my job, we tried to get people to invest in this property. So they wouldn't even come to the table to discuss because they feel it's a total waste of their time. So why am I going to put resources together? That was why BDDC started with the financial analysis, because we wanted to find out what's really preventing people from investing in this property. And from the financial analysis that we did, we found out that there was a huge gap to the redevelopment of the property. So that's why we decided to come to council and see how the TIF program can help to bridge that gap.
Thank you, and if I may, Your Worship, just a quick follow-up. You know, I appreciate you bringing this forward, and I'm supportive of this. And the reason being is you know, having been there in the Renaissance Brandon days and when this first sort of started coming together, I think there's times as a city or times as an organization that you have to, not to use sports analogies all the time, but you have to turn to the back of the playbook and look at different options that potentially aren't your go-to every days. And I think this is one of those opportunities. And I think, you know, there's a lot of potential benefit, albeit that it maybe isn't tomorrow, but it's a long-term benefit for the city. And I commend you and your group for bringing this forward.
Good, thank you.
I didn't see any other hands up, so I think that's got it covered. So thank you very much, Mr. Agason, and excellent presentation. And as you know, it's comes up later on our agenda, so we're going to be dealing with it right this evening. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much.
And go ahead, Councillor Desjarlais.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. I move that the presentation by Emeka Agason on behalf of the Brandon Downtown Development Corporation with respect to the Princess Priority Sites Tax Increment Financing Bylaw be received.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Lupke. Any discussion? Call for the question then. All those in favour? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And next item, please.
Also under presentations, Your Worship, we have representation from Kim Longstreet, regarding Private Members Bill 217 and the work of the Brandon Harm Reduction Network.
Very good. Welcome to you.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors and citizens watching. I'm here tonight to talk about Bill 217, Bill 216, and Brandon's Harm Reduction Network. I'm not going to read each slide. I'm hoping council's had an opportunity to review them, so I'll leave them up on the screen and people can read them while I'm chatting. So my son's 10-year struggle with substance use hasn't been an easy one. Overdoses have happened to him in the latter part of his substance use disorder due to an unsafe supply of drugs in our community. If I polled council members right now, I'm sure that you would all say you have used your possible drug of choice, alcohol, in a safe place like a bar or a lounge. Question to consider is, why can't the other substance users have the same courtesy of a safe supply for the drugs they use? Back in July 2017, I brought to City Council of that time many concerns about the lack of resources and services in our community for persons struggling with a substance use disorder. 5 years later, and we are nowhere near meeting the need of our addictions crisis. I'm hopeful that another 5 years doesn't pass us by, resulting in more unnecessary pleas for help and the deaths that arise from not getting that help. Bill 217. It's a bill that is put forward by MLA Bernadette Smith. She's with the NDP. Manitoba is the only province in Canada that is not transparent about its overdose deaths or stats. On the federal government website, you will find all the provinces listed, and Manitoba is the only one with not applicable in all of its columns. My guess as to why the stats are not relayed in a transparent and time-friendly manner is because to do so would actually tell the truth about where our province is in its efforts to address our addiction crisis. Having this truth brought to light would mean that more effort and funding is required to effectively address the issues each day. Each day that the issue remains under the carpet is another day that a family member loses a loved one to an unnecessary death. My son is in recovery in Winnipeg at the moment. It's been a year since he's accessed the services at the Bruce Oak Recovery Centre, and they've worked with him a lot to give him many opportunities to deal with the reasons for his substance use disorder. As he heals, he gets more passionate about educating people and has taken it upon himself to collect signatures for this petition. If he thought I was a force to be reckoned with, I think he will be a bigger one once he gets through this learning time in his life. I can say definitively that our community has experienced overdose deaths and near misses at a rate that is much too high for a community of our size. I have partaken in saving the life of someone that was overdosing. Thankfully, I have never had to do that life-saving measure on my son, and I feel for anyone that has ever been put in that position. Bill 216. In 6 years, 27,000 people in Canada have died of an overdose. That's 4,500 per year, 12 per day, or 1 per hour. Our current drug policy has proven to be ineffective in the prevention of substance use and eradication. The war on drugs, I do get emotional when I talk about drugs and the effect it has on people because I am still in the throes of it, and my son is finding his way, and I'm passionate about these two bills. The war on drugs has resulted in widespread stigma towards those who use controlled substances. The war on drugs has allowed organized crime to be the sole provider of substances. Problematic substance use is a health issue and is not resolved through criminalizing personal possession and consumption. Decriminalization of personal possession is associated with dramatically reducing drug toxicity, deaths in the countries that have modernized their drug supply. Substance use is a normal part of human experience, documented across centuries and all over the world. So the petition now is there. They want to reform the drug policy. They want to provide a path forward for convictions. Of course, we're looking for a safer supply, and we're calling on the Government of Canada to support Bill C-216. The Harm Reduction Network. The invitation to establish this network was sent out to the community on February 5th, 2020, and of course I joined. In the 2 years, Solange Machado, the network coordinator, has brought awareness about harm reduction to the forefront of our community. Full credit goes to Solange and her work to get the network set up and for establishing a peer group and doing a survey that brings attention to our community's addiction crisis. There's the 3 things that they had hoped to achieve. Before I go on to this portion, I just wanted to say that we are going to be doing another survey in the very near future, and that one's going to focus on a quieter addiction in our community, which is opioids. It's the one that people cannot visibly see happening in our community, but continues to cause concern. And that is, of course, the addiction to the illicit drug, which is opioids. I want to share with you something that is happening in our community. It's happening for a few years now. It's called farm parties. It's our youth in our community taking pharmaceuticals from parents or whoever they can get it from. They put it on a bowl in the middle of a table in a party, and they take them and they drink and they tell each other how they're feeling. This is a thing, and it's happening in our community. So this specific survey was done with 50 people who are part of the peer group who openly use and say they use. So this was not a hard survey to do. The harder survey to do is going to be the opioids and the stigma that surrounds people who use that drug, and the need for them to keep silent so they do not get the backflack that I got when I came forward with my concerns. So again, I'm not going to go through every single slide. I know council was given this ahead of time. I think what is interesting about this particular slide is the use is mostly by Indigenous people, and that is not something new. That's a known fact. The next slide talks about employment, cell phones, which is a really important part of having people who use, having a way to communicate outwards. As you can see, not a lot have that or can afford to have that or have that at their disposal. So the respondents, 90 male or female, 92, the age between 25 and 45. I said the Indigenous, and we talked about the employment. This next one shows what resources have they accessed in the last 6 months. And you know, when this survey was being done, there was lots of conversation around people utilizing services and how they were feeling about utilizing those services, and a lot of negativity. There's a lot of people who say they will never set foot in a hospital again, they'll never set foot in 7th Street Health Access again, or such and such and such, just because of the way they were treated. My philosophy is you treat somebody the first time like you treat them the 100th time you've seen them. Next slide talks about usage, disposal, where, again. Maybe an eye-opener to some, but not to those of us who are on the streets, about where people are using and where sharps are getting dropped. Again, talking about what sort of things were people using, picking up from 7th Street Health Access or wherever their point of contact was. Talked about safe consumption site, and this past summer, a pop-up site, a safe injection site popped up in Winnipeg during an event. It was very well attended and was not okayed. The people who organized it just did it just to see how it would go, and it went very, very well. And you know, we're hoping maybe to see more of that later. Overdose. So again, a disturbing slide. When asked if they have overdosed, 24% yes. Asked if they overdosed by accident, 18%. My slides are very small. When asked in the last 6 months if they overdosed by accidents using unknown, right, oh yes, sorry, so yes, 14%. As I had alluded to on the earlier screen, and I have a hard time even reading it and saying it, but you know, my son used to call me and say, I'm about to use something from an unreliable source. This is where I am. If you don't hear from me in 5 minutes, come and get me. A lot of our people who now use with other people so that they have Narcan available or naloxone to be able to revive people. So they talk about the overdose again, which is very important, which is information that now is being made public more and more. I believe Winnipeg's own harm reduction is starting to put their information out more about overdose deaths because we're the ones who know. I can safely say our community has had a lot of overdoses and a lot of near misses, and those are not recorded anywhere. This slide here, have you witnessed an overdose? 49% have said yes. That's out of our people that we polled. So they witness this all the time amongst themselves. This slide here is an eye-opener for me. I didn't realize our community had this much going on. What is shocking to me, what we have never heard of before, is that people are in fact injecting alcohol at this point, and people are actually injecting the solution that you're given with Narcan because they believe it will give them a bigger high. So they are taking that and injecting it in themselves now. So that just adds to our issues with our drugs in our community. So that's a huge list. And that's just 50 people who have spoken to that. We know there's a lot more. Oh yeah, so prescription drugs. So DMT, that's a psychedelic. It gives you about a 45-minute high, and it's taken orally, smoked, or injected. Ketamine is an anesthetic, and it helps people obviously to lose consciousness, and they can't feel pain, and people are actually using those as well. So they talked about how often you use alone, and I'm happy to say that with all the work that's being done in harm reduction, we're actually getting people more and more using together so they can save each other, and that's how my son's life has been saved, is because he's used with people who've used, somebody doesn't use, and assists anybody who's overdosing. So there have been several recommendations, and again, I'm not going to go through them all because there's actually, I think, 3 slides of them that came out of the survey. And again, those are sitting with council at this point as for deliberation or thought. Yeah, so that's kind of what's going on in our community right now.
Okay, well, thank you very much. It was certainly a lot of information to unpack, as you highlighted, and I'm sure other councillors would have picked off their own pieces of it that are sometimes alarming, informative and the like, and you who are been associated with this for some time also found some that were even alarming to you. So it's an interesting package of information. So thank you very much, Kim, for that and for continuing to advocate. And so we're going to open up the floor, though, for questions from council. So feel free to come ahead. Councillor Shboy.
Thank you, Worship. Once again, thanks, Ms. Longstreet, for the presentation and updating us on the seriousness of the drug problem in Brandon and across the country. It's truly disturbing. What would be the most effective way for this city council to make a difference in these people's lives? Would it help for us to write a letter lobbying the government to amend the Fatality Inquiries Act to require them to publish the number of overdoses? What would you like us to do?
Well, your support of the bill would be great, in any way that you can knock on your MLA's doors and have that brought to their attention would be great. But I think the site on Princess Avenue would be perfect for a community wellness center, which our community needs. We need a place, a 24-hour location where we can serve the people who need the service. And when we look at our community of 50,000 people, it's not just them. It's the $200,000 or $180,000 trading area we have. They need service too. There's communities struggling just as bad and maybe worse than us who do not even have close to even what we can offer people, this pittance of, a few detox beds and whatever. So, I mean, if we want to do something and we want to make an impact and we want to make a difference, we're not going to get the help from this government. We're going to have to pull together as a community. The community is going to have to see the need. The communities outside of our community are going to have to pull together and determine how they could probably support something like this. I have given every last ounce and drop of myself, of solutions, ideas, thoughts, everything over and over and over. And at this juncture, I'm at a loss anymore. I really am. I do not want to see our community have another 5 years of what we've seen. Can you imagine what our community will be in 5 years if something doesn't happen? Think about it. Think about what's happened in the last 5 years. Do we want this to continue? Because it is going to continue, and it is going to get worse if we don't do something serious.
Okay, thanks for that. Other questions? Councillor Cameron?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Longstreet. Thank you very much for the presentation. You'd mentioned on the Community Wellness Center, and I had a question around, and it sort of correlates to what you were mentioning about the 7th Street access and how people feel that they don't feel safe or don't feel that they want to access that site anymore for any number of reasons. As a city, how, in your opinion, how do we make sure that if we do look into a community wellness center, that it is a welcoming space and it is a space that people are wanting to access? Because ideally, if something like that is to be constructed, you want to ensure that it's being used at its maximum, to its maximum impact to help the community. So just wondering your thoughts on that.
Sure. So for the last 5 years, you've had an organization in your community who is hugely respected, not just by the community itself, but by the people it serves, and that is the Brandon Bear Clan. If you want to learn how to provide service to people without judgment, that's where you need to look to, and you need to ask for their help to teach people how to treat people like a human being, whether you see them 1 time or 100 times, and stop the stigma, stop the judgment. That's why the Bear Clan is successful and well received. There's no judgment there. I see somebody the first time in 2017 when we started, I might still see them today struggling. I don't treat them any different than the first day I seen them in 2017. They're still a person to me. They still deserve the respect. They still deserve all the things that come with healing.
I'm not seeing other hands. So the Brandon Harm Reduction Network has obviously done a tremendous amount of work, like the research, the data that you've collected in itself. Is this being presented to the province? As you know, well, we're trying and we're advocating. You and I have had lots and lots and lots of interactions, and we're doing what we can as a municipality. The main responsibility, as you know, for health, mental health, and addictions is at the provincial level. I'm never one to want to sound like we're passing the buck, but on the other hand, you have to be realistic in terms of jurisdictions, what level of authority we have, what resources we have. So with such a robust package of information, is this being shared to the province the same way you're sharing it to us? Like, this is, to me, valuable information that they may have through their own channels. They may not. Like, you were able to survey 50 users. I don't know what it, and got these people with lived experience to provide quite a broad perspective on lots of things. So to me, it's quite valuable information. We want to make sure, we're hearing it. Our public are hearing it. Was already covered in the newspaper already, so the process is starting. But so we sure want to make sure that those that deal with it the most ought to hear it as well. So I just wasn't sure if that's already been done, if it's planned to be done, or.
So the document itself on the outcome of the survey has been provided to Bernadette Smith with the NDP MLA, of which I'm on a committee with Glenn Samard. also NDP, MLA, Brandon East candidate. So in my mind's eye, yes, it is sitting with the government as she shared it. She's brought it forward into chamber or into question period. I will be on CBC tomorrow at noon if you're interested in listening, and we're going to talk some more about it. And yes, letters have gone to yourselves, council, from Antoinette, and those letters have also gone on to MLAs as well. So it is a conversation. It's a conversation that's been happening for a while. So yes, and the reason for the petition ×2, the petition more for the Manitoba one is to get the word out there and get people aware that Manitoba is behind the times as usual.
Okay. Thanks for that. I'll keep the floor open for any other questions that may come about. Councillor Fawcett.
Thank you, through your worship. As everybody knows, I tend to not ask questions as much as make statements. So and this is mostly for Kim, because I appreciate her coming, because she is living a lot of this experience all the time. So she is boots on the ground. But just so you know that when we do get these presentations, like, that is not the only time we see them, and it doesn't go idle. As a matter of fact, in the last stretch, we've been doing an awful lot of work. We know that COVID did wreak havoc on this issue. Like, it's even been worse. It hasn't helped. But even with some of the projects we're working on with, Tim Silversides is here today. He's going to talk about some low-hanging fruit, not the bigger issues that we're looking at with the downtown community wellness and health. The CWC is moving, so Community Wellness Collaborative is moving on this. We do have some of that assigned sober center, and that's one of these things where there's kind of some money without a plan. Got to get that plan in place, and that will be working with the province, working with ourselves and our collaborators, and working with the federal government. BNRC did a really interesting presentation to BUPAC just the other day on homelessness. They have fantastic data. And actually, while we were looking at this, there's a really interesting and unfortunate overlap on this data. So, I think that we'll share this, because it's public now, with BUPAC, and we'll continue to talk on that. And we're getting a lot more involved in a lot of this, which includes the federal government, of course, when we're dealing with BUPAC initiative things. So, as the leads, hopefully we can continue to work with our partners, locally and the different levels of government. And I don't want you to you are going to keep pushing. And I actually would like to see your son beside you pushing, and I know him, so I know he could push harder than you probably when push comes to shove. Don't shove, though. And we are working on it, and we really are working hard on it. There's a lot of stuff that hits the city council table, but this is something that we are really aware of, and we want to come up with things that can make it better. I hate to say it, I don't think we can make it go away, but we can make it better, and that is our goal. And so that's more of a statement to you, just to let you know that your coming here isn't wasting your time. Okay?
Thank you, Councillor Fawcett. Other questions or statements, if they choose to? Okay, welcome. Sorry, Councillor Desjardins, go ahead.
Thank you, to your worship. So, well, Kim, there was so much information, and so even though I've had a chance to look at it, I have not dived into all of it. But one of the things, and thank you for your presentation, obviously, but one of the things that I'm curious about is when you're surveying those marginalized individuals or folks struggling with this, did you ask how many of them would seek treatment if it were available?
I can't remember if that's part of the...
Because I'd be interested in hearing that, because we hear that we're lacking treatment facilities, we're lacking detox centers, and I'm really curious to know how many users currently out there would be seeking those things out, but because they're not available, they're still waiting. Your son obviously is, and I'm not saying he's an exception, he was certainly one that was looking for it and wasn't able to access it. But I am curious how many of those are actually you know, when we think about the stages of change, how many of them are actually ready for treatment and aren't able to access it? And if that's where we should be focusing, or if we should actually be focusing more on some of the harm reduction stuff that you presented today.
Yeah, so as somebody who has, well, we're well over 500 patrols with the Bear Clan. I'm almost 400 of those. And lots and lots and lots of conversations and wet shoulders from lots of tears. People just have given up. They've asked, the resources haven't been provided, they're on waiting lists, and they just don't care. They just give up. Like it's like, this is my lot in life. This is what it's going to be for me. Nobody cares. Nobody's offering. You know, one of the hardest things for Bear Clan to see was when we all went into COVID shutdown, all of our people were out on the street still with nowhere to go, no services, nothing. They felt abandoned by this city. So have they asked? Should we be asking them if they would take treatment? Yes, they would take treatment if it was offered. If they didn't have to wait for 2 to 3 months to get into detox and then live detox, to go to wait for 6 months to get into treatment, to get out of treatment, to wait for 5 months to get into sober living. Yeah, people have asked. People have asked, and people have asked and have died because they haven't been given support. An inquest into examiner, I am working on an inquest right now with somebody whose loved one died and shouldn't have died. The only one that I have been asked to work on them with, and I am going to see it through with them. And the reason that they have died is because the system failed them. And that's with all these overdose deaths. The system has failed. You can't tell me that all these people are addicted to something and have never wanted help and asked for it and at some point been refused. You get refused enough times, you just succumb to whatever the outcome will be. Yes, my son is an exception because he wanted treatment. He didn't want to be in that state. He wanted to play for the Toronto Raptors. That was his dream. He's never going to do it. He's 34 years old. 10 years of his life gone. How many times did he ask for help? How many times was he turned away from Ram Clinic? How many times did he go to the ER and have people treating him like he was crap? It's hurtful. It's hurtful for me, and it's hurtful for everybody who has to deal with that day after day after day. And yes, it is hard for me to talk about it. I'm embarrassed and ashamed sometimes with how my son has been treated, how everybody gets treated because they have an addiction. It's got to stop. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kim. I think that ended the questions, and as always, sterling presentation and certainly filled with passion. Thank you very much. Okay, a motion to receive is recommended. If somebody would like to make that. Councillor Jarley, go ahead.
Yeah, through your worship, I move that the presentation by Kim Longstreet on behalf of the Brandon Harm Reduction Network with respect to Private Members Bill 217, the Fatalities Inquiries Amendment Act, be received.
Seconder, please. Councillor Cameron. Any discussion? Ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay. Next item, please.
Community comments or feedback, Your Worship?
Very good. This is a portion on Council's agenda that it holds open to anyone in the audience who would like to make any comment or feedback about any item that is on this evening agenda, and a total of 15 minutes is open for question period. Okay, we have other things, presentations coming up, but that has that covered off. Thank you. Next item, please.
Under the order of delegations, Your Worship, we have Jody Sass and Daryl Wolski from Fruit Truck Wars requesting a blanket licensing of vendors for that event.
Very good.
Mr. Sass is not able to be here today due to some medical issues. Yesterday at Midway Palooza, he was bitten by a spider. We're not really sure. Anyway, so thanks for having me here. And Your Worship, I think this will maybe be the last time I'm in front of you. Kind of like Tommy Hunter, the last concert tour, and maybe come back. I don't know.
I don't know. Well, there was quite a number of them. I'm here for another 5 months, so come ahead.
Anyways, I'm here on behalf of Food Truck Wars. I think we've slowly grown this into a major annual event to be one of the larger events in Brandon and Western Manitoba over the last 5 years. What we're doing here today is to try and streamline the process for our out-of-town food trucks and food vendors. For whatever reason, it's a bit of a task for them to figure out the business license application. And so what we're here to do is just for us to, as a company as BDNMB and Food Truck Wars, is to get an actual event license or an event permit, just have one blanket license. I'll cover our out-of-town trucks. The in-town food trucks that are existing, there's about a half dozen of them, 5 to 7 on there. They'll have licenses anyway, so this doesn't really involve them. And I guess part of our plan too was with this permit/license, it would only cover them for Food Truck Wars. So I know at times various food trucks will show up out of town and they'll set up at the Victoria Inn or wherever it might be, and so that would not cover under our permit. So this is just for our 4 days in the third week of September, and it's just for anything. It's also to help. Various food trucks have got the feedback from the licensing department here that, why don't the organizers go in front of City Council? And so here we are, and we're trying to just basically make the process easier for us and for you and just make it one transaction.
Okay, thank you very much. Fairly straightforward, but we'll open up the floor for questions. Mr. Walski? Mr. Cullen, Councillor Cullen.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Wolski. So you're proposing that you would do all the administration of the paperwork that needed to be done to take care of the health aspects and the licensing part?
Yeah, the health aspects are totally separate, which we have to do regardless.
Okay.
With the Manitoba Health Department, and with the fire department, et cetera. So this is just for the actual city licensing.
Right. So you're not asking for a discount on volume. You're not doing those kind of things. You're just saying that we'll collect the money, we'll submit the licensing fees on their behalf, and we'll collect from the individual trucks.
Right, and I guess whatever the fee is that comes up with, whatever amount it comes to, we'll have this year, give or take 28 trucks, and probably 20 of them will be out of town.
Okay.
Councillor Fawcett?
Yeah, through your worship, this may not be to Mr. Wolski, but maybe to our own staff. Like, because in theory, that seems like it would be fine, but that's not a decision for us really to make. It's a matter is, does it work for staff? Can staff just do that? It seems like something that could just be discussed with staff.
Yeah, so I think pending, having heard Mr. Walski and getting, council's input, I think this would probably have to be referred back to staff. I think certainly not a roadblock, but it's a reality that I think our licensing, like our fee schedule, doesn't have one of these, and that's not to say that we can't create one. So, and again, I appreciate the fact that you've come in decent time. The event is in September?
Correct.
Yeah, so, we've got a number of months, so it's excellent. You've come well ahead, so we could ask staff to puzzle this out and see what we can come up with for a thing that could work. So that kind of answers your question, Councillor Fawcett. Yeah, and Councillor Lupke.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Wolski. And just I want to make sure I'm clear on what you're asking, because I guess I came into tonight thinking that you were asking for like a one license for your event for
That's correct.
The food trucks.
That's correct.
Not for you to handle the individual licensing for the
That's
food
correct.
trucks. Right, so far, and I'm just going to be hypothetical here because I don't know what the fee would be, but if it was $200 for a business license per food truck, what you're saying is then that you would want a permit for the event for those food trucks for, $4,000 or whatever that figure might be.
Basically, yeah, that's correct. What we're trying to do is just trying to alleviate.
Streamline.
Yeah, streamline, and that's what I had written down in my notes today. But you're correct. Is basically the trucks have to come in. Not that this is a big deal, but they have to come in a day in advance, and for whatever reason, it's a brain buster for them. They can't seem to figure it out. So we're just trying to alleviate. For me, I'm just trying to alleviate phone calls and texts. So
Yeah, no, I get that. I just wanted to make sure we knew what you were asking.
you were
for.
correct. Yeah, you're 100% correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good, well, and it's good we all want to be on the same page, and that's good. Councillor Chaboyer?
Thank you, Worship. Through to the presenter. Your blanket license, would that mean then that you would assume liability, or would they separately assume liability the same way if they would have their individual license? I'm just trying to think of who the responsibility falls on if there is an issue. would it fall on you or would it fall on the individual vendor?
That's a good legal question. I don't have an answer for that right now. Most of the time, food trucks do have to provide their own liability insurance. Plus, we have already a liability package for our event as itself. But to answer your question, I don't really have a great answer for
I
you
was
on
just
that.
more interested in the criteria on that, because I haven't looked at the application that they individually would have to fill out, but I'm assuming that they would have to follow all the same rules within that permit. And then I'm just wondering if there was a concern, if it would be your problem or if they would have to deal with it.
And you know, like, I've never looked at the application myself either. So I don't know even what it entails and like what hoops they have to go through, so to speak, if there is hoops at all.
Yeah, and again, information probably would come back from our administration. I don't think our licensing implies any liability coverage really on the part of the city and so on. Like, that's still a separate
I
domain.
was just thinking about there might be rules on the way they park, the location, everything that might be laid out in the license. And I just wonder, do they go to him if there's a problem or would they go to the individual vendor? So.
Yeah, good point. So, okay, any other questions? Okay, well, again, for my part, I think that, notwithstanding any legalese that the administration might find, I think that, as has been demonstrated here, somebody's kind of a bulk buy, just save, and to be honest with you, it kind of cuts both ways. It ought to save our administration some issues as well. Oftentimes then they're having to chase down people, sometimes because they didn't know any better. Oh, I didn't realize where I had to go and all this. So it probably just clean it all up for both parties and just take one thing off your list to smooth it out and make your vendors happier and smooth it out for us. So, like to think we'd like to be able to find a solution to that. So.
Well, last thing is just like in the past, they've had to come down the clipboard and they go, okay, Constable, Desjardins truck's good too. Then they just go down the list, right? And they go, oh, hang on, Sean Berry didn't pay. Sorry, Sean, I had to use the example. I couldn't do the camera. So anyways, just as an example, so then all of a sudden, well, then it gets really awkward and so, well, why didn't you pay? Well, I didn't know about it. And so there's always those things that come up. So, and like I said, streamlining is, like Councillor Fawcett says, it's probably the best way to sum it up.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up, so I think it's covered. Thank you very much, Mr. Walski. We'll see where this goes. Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that the presentation by Darrell Walski with respect to blanket licensing of vendors for food truck wars be received, and further we ask administration to investigate blanket licensing for special events for vendors.
Seconded by Councillor Parker. I think you had your hand up, right? Yeah. Mover wish to speak?
No, Your Worship. I think we did. I guess I'm going to speak a little bit. I think we kind of covered in the presentation. It does make a lot of sense for events of this nature to do a blanket license for vendors that normally would have to take out individual licenses from the city.
Very good. Other discussion? See any? I think people that know a little bit about the licensing department are listening, so we'll take it from there. So, ready for the question then? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And next item, please.
Also under delegations, Your Worship, we have Julia Krivokovska, excuse me if I didn't pronounce that correctly, and Tatiana Morley on behalf of the Ukrainian-Canadian Association Trizev regarding assistance to incoming Ukrainian refugees.
Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, for giving opportunity for us to share and represent our association in Brandon. So, is it okay if Julie will just share? Because we don't have display. Yeah, sorry. Probably I will start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm a little bit emotional. The entire democratic world stands united with Ukraine and its courageous people today as they face the unimaginable loss and suffering caused by appalling and brutal Russian aggression against the peaceful Ukrainian land. As the Manitoba Premier has justly put it, 1 in 7 Manitobans is of Ukrainian descent, and during this terrible ordeal, we are all Ukrainians. In 2013, the Ukrainian community of Brandon was proud to announce the foundation of the non-profit organization Ukrainian Canadian Association, TRIZUB. Its original goal was to represent and celebrate the Ukrainian culture in our new home. In the current reality, TRIZUB has been very active and fruitful in contributing to the enormous efforts of Canadian charities and volunteer groups in support of Ukraine, striving to help prevent the unfolding humanitarian crisis in Europe. Our volunteers have raised close for today $75,000 in the past 2.5 months by means of various fundraisers. With the eager and generous support from Brandon and Westman residents, we have sold hundreds of dozens of pierogies and cabbage rolls. It has been heartwarming to see Ukrainian souvenirs and flags has been in big demand. All the raised funds are being regularly sent to our trustworthy volunteers and hubs in Ukraine, where they get distributed based on the highest need. The humanitarian aid sent to Ukraine by TRIZUB has reportedly allowed them to purchase the critically needed medical, tactical, and grocery supplies that were immediately forwarded to Ukrainian regions with limited or no access to humanitarian aids on the region of Ukraine was temporarily occupied by the Russian troops. We have even contributed to purchasing the so much needed heavy-duty trucks for the Ukrainian front line. And I just want to share with you, I had a phone call from my brother who's in the front line, and he was asking if we can help. It's urgent request for Rini Mobile. So right now we are trying to raise about $23,000, and for us it's very big money. And I just want to take a chance and maybe share with you, and maybe we can help all together to purchase this mobile, as we have our volunteer who's actually a resident of Brandon. He left to Ukraine, and he's our hands right now in Ukraine. And shortly after the war in Ukraine broke out, Canada welcomed thousands of Ukrainian families fleeing the humanitarian crisis. TRIZUB volunteers have graded up their efforts to welcome our landmates in Westman community. We truly hope that many of the arriving Ukrainian families will make Canada, particularly Brandon, their home. We realized that displaced Ukrainians have left all their life behind them, and they are coming to start their life from scratch. From our own experience, we can tell that the first several months in immigrants' status are extremely difficult and stressful. We are beyond placed to observe the level of assistance from the government and various agencies striving to allow these people settle as smoothly as possible. However, there are still a lot of aspects to look into. And I want to pass the word to Julie.
So what do we do as a community here in Brandon, as a Ukrainian community? We have been partnering with Westman Immigrant Services, and that we negotiate creation of the donation account for Westman Immigrant Services, as it's a registered charity organization. That account will particularly be used for accommodation use, for travel expenses, and for medical. So the money what people will be donating, Manitobas and Brandonians will be donating through the Westman Immigrant Services, will stay in economy, will stay in Brandon, will stay in Manitoba. So that will help the economy as well by helping Ukrainian people to settle in Canada and particularly in Brandon. The last page has some information how the donations can be made from Westman Immigrant Services. They do have an account set up so it can be done through their official webpage by the credit card. And there's even an option for everyone who willing to donate to post a note what this donation is supposed to be for. Either you want to do medical support, like pay for the medical examination for a family, or you just want to pay for someone's ticket, or pay for rent for someone, or help with the accommodation. Checks also can be made to Westman Immigrant Services with the specific memo indicating Humanitarian Funds Ukraine. So we also have a storage rented by one of the volunteers, actually donated to us to collect all of the household items. The people fleeing from Ukraine, from the war, coming here empty-handed with nothing. We're trying to support them with anything we can. So they will need some of the household items, like everything else, like beddings and like everything, kitchen stuff. So we as Trezup is excited to have received significant support from all of the local businesses. We have significant support from Sleep Country and other businesses we thankful for having business with. And we also we continue to receive funds to our own account, Open Westoba Credit Union. Though we're not registered charity, we just like a non-registered charity, we cannot provide a tax receipt, but we're still receiving donations every day, and those donations are particularly sent home to our trustworthy volunteers who are on the front line and who's distributing all of the necessary items to people who are in need and our soldiers who's fighting for their independence. So what are we seeking an assistance with? That's the main questions what we have right now. So we kind of divided into different sections. The main is transportation, accommodation, and medical. So by transportation, that's mean, I'm not going to read the whole article there, but it means, again, to start with, people need to somehow get to Canada. And then from Canada, from the main point of entry, they need to somehow get to Manitoba or to Brandon, right? We try to introduce Brandon as much as we can to all of the Ukrainians. We have created a video, and we posted on our social media about Brandon in Ukrainian, and we sharing information about Brandon and Manitoba, how welcoming Manitoba is, how welcoming Brandon is. That information has been shared, and a lot of people have seen it, and then a lot of comments, because some people, Europe is not big enough to hold all of the immigrants for all of the different countries, right? And then people trying to flee to Canada, and then we hope Canada will become a second home for them. And some of them will require help with tickets, as again, they're lucky if they have a passport on them when they flee from their homes. So we happy with the government of Canada, have actually heard all of the Ukrainians and made a couple of charter flights. One of those flights are coming to Winnipeg on May 23rd. Unfortunately, the families would we have a list of, and we've been in contact with, cannot make to that particular plane. There's a different bureaucratic paperwork to be done, and then some of them don't have the paperwork required them to obtain to go to that plane. So we're still hoping there's something like this will be done later by the federal government. But even for those people who will be willing to come, but their own cost or by the family members to a point of entry, Toronto, or any other big cities, they still will need some sort of support to get to Brandon or to Winnipeg. That's what we're looking for, like a financial assistance with the tickets to Canada and from the point of entry to Winnipeg. And then there is a program through the Ukraine to Canada. They have a program set up for people who willing to share their air miles and towards the tickets from Toronto to Winnipeg, and we have witnessed quite a few of them done so. And this actually Ukraine to Canada made it a bit easier for people just to share their air miles, not to do all of this from their own accounts. Also looking for transportation support from Winnipeg to Brandon. That's city buses, air shuttles, or any other the personal vans, or like the different retirement homes would have nice little buses what we can use. Unfortunately, we don't have a list of people who are going to be coming in like 10 or 15 of them at the same time, the Brandon bus lines would be perfect to use, but we also don't want to use those resources if you don't have that amount of people coming, right? We also looking for the hotel accommodation for 2-week isolation, and I think that has been already agreed by the federal government. It has been announced by the Prime Minister where the 2 weeks accommodation in a hotel will be provided for Ukrainians. We just don't really have that clear on our end if those people will be willing to have 2 weeks isolation in Brandon, and then are we actually have a hotel setting things ready for to accommodate those people, right? And also be looking for supportive housing, rentals, and list for potential hostess who are willing to host Ukrainian families. There is an organization called New Journey Housing in Winnipeg, and then we've been contacting with them through the Investment Immigrant Services, and they're willing to be like a main point of we will send them a list of people how would we know are coming to Canada, to Brandon, and we will send them a list of hostess who are willing to host Ukrainian families. We have that list. Western Immigrant Services has been making a list. Larry McGuire office has been making a list. We will be sharing that information with this organization, and hopefully they will be doing it on their own, connecting to people and organizations and those people who are actually willing to host the families. Because we worry on our end about the safety of both parties, right, like Ukrainians and Canadian families, because there is different circumstances what can happen in both ways, right? So we just want to be sure both parties will be safe on both sides. From the city, what we're looking for is a 3-bus city passes, at least for 3 months. Gives people who are going to be coming, again, they will have no accommodation, they will have no source of traveling, and majority of those people who are coming will be women and kids. They will need some sort of accommodation to get to the interviews, to the sources, to Investment Immigrant Services, and travel between the cities and finding a job. So that would be very beneficial for all of the newcomers to have at least for 3 months to have a bus passes. We move into accommodation. As we mentioned, we have rented the storage where we collecting household items. You can see the address on the information sheet for that storage, and then if anyone willing to donate anything, you're more than welcome, and you can give a call to one of our volunteers, and she can access to that storage anytime, and then provide access to everyone who are willing to donate. Like I said, everything what you can think of would be like towers and like kitchen stuff, like anything, and we would really appreciate any donation. Child care is another painful topic, and I know that's not a city and municipal government level, but we know the Government of Canada has established some sort of subsidized program for first few months for mummies who can have a child care, but that unfortunately the child care is not, they're not talking about the home-based daycares, and that's probably the best solution for us at this moment, because you know how painful it is to be in a line to put your kid in a daycare, and we don't really have that time. If the parents, the mummies of kids are coming, they need to put their kids somewhere in order to find a job and go actually work to make income to support the families. So we were looking into the possibility of maybe fitting those families who really need somehow in a list, and I know it's not fair to other families who've been on the list for a long time, but somehow do the shortest list for those couple of families who are going to be coming and will have a very big need of daycare, or maybe a possibility of use subsidized program for non-licensed home-based daycares, which we already have a couple of daycares, and we have senior people who came already and willing to be to have a kind of a home-based daycare, but would be beneficial for the parents and for that host to have that, to be able to get that subsidized program. We also been looking into recreation and mental support for families, youth and kids, just to help them to settle in Canada and in Brandon. So as you all understand, war is not nothing fun, and all of those families will be coming with mental issues. So we're looking for a possibility to discount or to use the recreation facilities such as YWCA or gyms or any other, like, pools for kids, at least like some sort of discount, or like we have for seniors or something, like, so that they can access it easily, and then they can have, but they can spend some time there. So maybe possibility of getting discount grants to other attraction activities like a summer fair, movies, and summer camps for kids. That would be beneficiary for them as well, just to settle in Canada and in Brandon. Medical, I think we've been talking about this quite a while with the mayor and then other governments. Medical is very painful as well. All of the people who are coming here will have a work visa and will have a work permit and student permit. So in order to make that permit legal and follow all of the instructions, they have to obtain the medical exam. The medical exam must be done at the licensed immigration medical clinic, which is here, Brandon Clinic in Brandon. So the cost of those kind of exams vary between $150 and $350. I think 15 plus. You have to pay about $340 for that medical exam. So let's say if it's a family of 3, you have to, mom and 2 kids, it's $1,000 from their pocket just to get a medical exam done. That's very tough on people who are coming with no support and no money to start with. And we were looking into possibility of waiving. I know it's legal cost would probably has to stay, but maybe there is some sort of specific grants or any like discounts can be provided to those people. I know something like that has been done in Winnipeg when on a city level when they are providing 50% off to the medical examination for in those cases. So that's pretty much what we would like to discuss with you. We thank you for the support and for willingness to help. We have been meeting Mayor for so many times now. I know we're annoying, and we appreciate everyone's support. Like, we're knocking every door to the federal, provincial, and municipal government. We've been meeting with Larry McGuire, and we have meetings scheduled with the provincial government as well. And we are very thankful for the support from the community. People are very open hearts. Like, we just can't express. I'm too emotional today. I'm not sure. I was in public so many times, but today kind of hard to express what we want to kind of point out to you. But support to Ukraine is very important, because whatever is going on in Ukraine right now, it's not fair to, and it's among all of the other international laws or anything what has been established in the world since the Second World War too. So we very thankful for any support you can provide, and then any points you, any donations you can do as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to both of you, Julia and Tatiana. And you've not been annoying. It's been a great pleasure to meet with you on a number of occasions. Myself and the city manager were able to meet with your group. You're very organized, as council could see by the documentation that they provided and the presentation that they've made. Rally was organized yesterday in front of City Hall. A number of councillors attended, and many citizens. It's heartwarming to see, as was the previous couple of rallies, so there's certainly a great deal of support for this situation, and as unthinkable as it is. So we're going to open up the floor for questions from councillors, and then we can maybe make a couple of comments at the end. So any questions are welcomed. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Yulia and Tatiana. Appreciate the presentation today. Definitely, you've both been very forward-focusing in ensuring that you can reach out to family members in the Ukraine, help support the Ukrainian Canadian community in Brandon. How are you faring? It's one of those things that quite often in times of crisis, people don't take care of themselves as well. So I'm just I'm hopeful. It's not even a question, but I'm just hopeful that if there's anything the rest of the city can do, or we as a community can do to support the Ukrainian Canadians that are here, so that you can focus on the needs at on the home front, so to speak. I just want to put that out there because, like I say, I know quite often in times of crisis, people will focus on everything they need to do, but don't often look after themselves. So.
Yeah, and thank you for pointing this out. Like, we on edge, I think. We've been keeping up very good. We are united as we never been, Ukrainian community here in Brandon, but it is tough on everyone because we're all working, right? We all have to make income for our families. We came to Canada a few years ago, someone been here for 2, someone for 10, whatever, right? We still have to work and then make an income. So it's very hard on all of us because it's a lot of work to put together and then a lot of support we have to provide to those families, to our own families and the families who have nobody here and have no connection to Brandon or to Manitoba or to Canada. So we think about those people, and we sometimes forget, yes, to think about ourselves, and that's sometimes become an issue, but it's not a priority because people in Ukraine are suffering more than us here, and we need to.
Sometimes feel like, I'm guilty because I'm here and I cannot go and fight. And that's probably move us stronger, and be strong because their life here is nothing compared in Ukraine.
You must be strong. Like, we try to keep our emotions aside, but cry in a pillow with the night. But on public, we have to be strong, and we have to kind of be strong for those people who are fighting there because it's definitely more suffering for them than for us here.
Like I say, through your worship, I commend you both, and I commend the Ukrainian Canadian community because the front line in these situations can take on many forms, and the front line that you're creating here. The support that you're offering, it's incumbent on us in the community to ensure that we're supporting you so that you can support your families. So,
other questions? I think adding to your go ahead, Councillor Jarley.
Yeah, no, through your worship, thanks for the presentation, and not easy to be here under these circumstances, and our hearts go out to you and to everybody that you're working with to bring here to the province. One of my questions is around access to housing, knowing that we already have challenges in our community. Already affordable housing issues, home ownership is a challenge, rentals a challenge. What has been the response from our community? Do all of these families that are coming have places, and if not, what is the process for Brandonites or folks in the Westman area who are willing to open up their homes to refugees in need?
We've been overwhelmed with the amount of people who contact us. A different location where we are selling souvenirs or participating in the fair or anything, or just over the phones, there's a humongous amount of people calling us and telling us, I have a room, I have a house, I have a cabin, I can do, I have an apartment or whatever. Like, everyone, we're putting all those names on the list, and we definitely double checking with them if that's okay for you to, for us to put your name on the list and then later on contact you. And we do have a list of people, like I mentioned, and we also, people been contacting Larry's McGuire's office, and we did ask them to make a list as well. And Westman Immigrant Services, same thing. Like, we have been asked them to have to create a list of those people. Now we have shared that list with Westman Immigrant Services, and we hope we're in the process to share that information with that new organization, New Journey, because we just find out last week when we were on the meeting with Westman Immigrant Services. We have meetings every week just to update each other, and we, as in a conversation that come up with this organization, might be very helpful because it's going to be like a point center for both parties, right? As Brandon community, we have 28 families on the list so far. What we know would planning on coming to Brandon. Some of them have connections to our community, and some of them are already here. My sister and her family is here. Tatiana's mom is here, and never been in motion for two months. Sorry. and other 2 families are here as well. And the rest people are still in the process of getting the paperwork done. And I know it's taking too much time, but just so we understand, the paperwork is not that easy to do because there are no visa centers open in Ukraine. It has to be obtained through any other European countries. Poland is the closest one. And then the waiting list to get biometrics done and then to get the passport stamped is very, people have to stay there for 2 or 3 months to get their paperwork done on their own expenses. So, so we do have the list of people who wanting to come to Brandon, and they're still waiting for their paperwork, and we hope we will have accommodation for those people. But again, we just worry about the legal way of doing this. That's why we've been contacting this organization, because we can't take the responsibility for people, right? We can't take the responsibility for Canadian side and for Ukrainian side, because people are going to be coming, like I said, mostly women and kids, and they're going to have like some mental issues because it's the war, right? They're fleeing, and they may need some support. And the same with Canadian side. There has been a notice from the Canada, some different situations where the males been asking young females to host in their homes, right? And that was a red flag for the government, I think. So, like, we happy we discovered that organization. Hopefully, that's going to be the best way for all of us to deal with this information. We will share information with them, and they will be contacting those families and have the host contacting. But then for 2 weeks, most of the families will have to have an accommodation for 2 weeks when they arriving to Canada, because majority of them have vaccinated, but they don't have a proof of vaccination because of the war and then all of the organizations being closed. Hopefully the government announced that supplement program or something with accommodation for 2 weeks will be provided. We just not sure if something like that is getting ready to be in Brandon as well, right? So people arriving to Winnipeg, and then if we have accommodation for them to come to Brandon, we want to make sure we have a place to put them for 2 weeks. And then if I know that program is supposed to even involve the food and delivery for those 2 weeks as well. So we just want to have that clear, to be clear for all of us, because people are contacting us, and then some of them will start arriving, and we want to make sure we have a plan and we know what we do. Sorry, I'm quite a talker, so I have to stop.
Okay.
You'd fit on council just fine.
Any other questions of our presenters? Okay, well, I'd like to thank you. I'm just going to make some comments. Trying to connect the group with other officials at the appropriate levels, the province as an example, and try to open some doors for them, contacts to the medical community. There's certainly things on here that are in our own bailiwicks, transit passes and so on and so forth. So following the receipt of this, we'll probably ask council to ask our administration to kind of have a look at this and kind of recommend back to us, how we might be able to find ways of helping the most. And, naturally you'll stay in touch with us anyways as it starts to sort of, kind of flush out, as you have families that are now coming to Brandon, they're on their way, and so on and so we know how many, when they're arriving, and it gets very real. Then we'll need to be ready, and I'm sure we'll find ways to help as much as we can, of course. And I'm very obviously we're all heartwarmed by the plight you're going through with your families, and it's understandable how you would be emotional. He's not here tonight, Vasil, but struck by comments that he made in the paper today in terms of, he's living here, but now that this is on, he's never been more proud to be Ukrainian, more proud of the Ukrainian flag, to see it flying in Brandon even, and proud of Ukrainian president and whatnot. So it is galvanizing the Ukrainian people, but I think it's galvanizing the people of the world. And so I think everybody is joining together to do what they can, and I think you'll see that continue to be an outpouring of Brandon residents are very kind and big hearts, and so no doubt that's going to continue. So thank you very much for providing such a thorough presentation, I hope you can keep up the energy to keep doing what you're doing, because I know how hard you're working. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us today. Thank you.
Okay, motion to receive would be in order, please. Cameron?
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the presentation from Yulia Krikovska and Tatiana Morley on behalf of the Ukrainian Canadian Association TRIZA with respect to assistance to Ukrainian refugees coming to Brandon be received, and further that administration report back at a later date to Council on opportunities to assist.
Perfect. Seconder, please. Jarley, movers to speak.
No, thank you, Your Worship. Just appreciated the presentation this evening.
Any other discussion? Councillor Jarley.
Just briefly, not that I think we even add anything to that, but it might be worth looking at like an evergreen program for refugees for the city, right? This might not be the last time that this happens, so it might be nice for us to consider, what we would do in response to any time this happens.
Okay, that's a fair comment. And any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Very good. Thank you again, and carry on. We'll talk soon. And next item, please.
Committee reports, Your Worship, and we do have a report from the earlier Committee of the Whole meeting.
Very good.
And
So go ahead and present that. Is that the...
Through Your Worship to Council, I would note that City Council met in a closed Committee of the Whole meeting earlier this evening to consider a report from the Director of Planning and Buildings with respect to the sale of Princess Downtown Priority Site, whereby a recommendation was put forward by Councillor Lupke and agreed to upon by City Council, and it would now be appropriate to make that motion in open session.
Thank you very much. And maybe you could read the motion, and we'll do this backwards, and we'll ask for somebody who had consented to have moved it.
So we should have a motion to accept that verbal report I just gave.
Okay.
First, thank you.
Councillor Lupke, seconded by Councillor Cullen. Any discussion on acceptance of the report? Call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And then the motion, and then we'll get a sponsor for it.
So the motion reads that the city-owned lands as part of the Princess Development Site as shown on Attachment A of the report of the Director of Planning and Buildings be sold for the purchase price of $1, subject to the purchaser executing an offer and option agreement with the City of Brandon as per the terms set forth in the Land Transaction Policy and Procedure Number 1025 and the supplementary site-specific conditions in Regulation Site Reg-01 under the Downtown Tax Increment Financing Bylaw Number 7322, and further, that administration be authorized to execute the associated agreements required to protect the city's interests in accordance with any procedures, policies, bylaws, and acts.
Thank you. Somebody prepared to make that motion? Councillor Desjarlais, seconder. Councillor Lupke. And I'm pretty sure that Ms. Iwazik has laid that out pretty much the way you would have stated it. So
took the words right out of my mouth.
Any discussion?
Wondering if we could get the clerk to repeat that.
The gentleman from the Brandon Sun left. I was going to say, and if you just did not get anything else that out of this whole meeting, it was that. So you can catch up with us on this afterwards, Mr. Slark. So we don't want you to miss anything. So any discussion, Councillor Fawcett?
Just through Your Worship, just I would never question the wording, Mr. Wasik, but just for the public, that we're saying be sold for the purchase price, but it isn't being sold right now. It's being offered. We're being offered to sold at the purchase price of $1.
That would be a fair comment. Yeah, that does. We're prepared to sell it for $1. We don't have a.
Yeah, it's not being sold.
We're entering it into the market.
Yeah, just for pedantics.
Yeah, no, I think it's valuable. Any other discussion? Ready for the question then? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And next item, and this will come up again under later in the agenda, I believe. Does it not?
Yes.
Okay.
We have the Personnel Committee reports. And I don't know if your worship, saying that I thought Ms. Poole was going to be here. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Looking all over there. Yes, thank you.
So we've got, two matters to consider, and we'll probably need to do these separately. So I guess maybe ask the Director of Human Resources to come forward and make the presentation that was made to the Personnel Committee.
Good evening, everyone. Which would you like to start with, Your Worship?
What's on the agenda first? It looks like it's the...
Paramedics and firefighters.
Yes. Well, the E911.
Okay. So the Personnel Committee, at its meeting held on the 9th day of May, 2022, begs leave to report as follows and submits recommendations where deemed necessary and expedient. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss the tentative agreement with the Brandon Professional Firefighters Paramedics Association, Local 803, on behalf of the E911 Police Dispatch Division. Negotiations commenced in December of 2021, with a settlement being reached on May 9th, 2022, which was ratified by the union membership shortly after. The negotiated settlement is within mandate, and highlights include general wage increases. So on January 1st of 2022, there will be a 1.25% increase. On July 1st of 2022, there will be another 1.25% increase. January 1st of 2023, 1.25, and July 1st of 2023, 1.25. There's also an increase to the night shift differential, the inclusion of an interest arbitration clause, which removes the threat of a strike in this essential service, and it's a 2-year contract which is set to expire on December 31st of 2023. The proposed settlement is now being presented to City Council for consideration and decision, inclusive of administration's recommendation as follows: that the City of Brandon enter into a 2-year agreement with the Brandon Professional Firefighters Paramedic Association, Local 803, for the period of January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2023, as per the memorandum of settlement, whereby general wage increases shall be increased by 1.25 on January 1st, 2022, July 1st, 2022, another 1.25, January 1st, 2023, 1.25, and July 1st, 2023, 1.25.
Thank you very much. So this it was in the package. I'm going to just make a comment just in great deference to all the members of the Personnel Committee, uncharacteristically. So there are 4 members of the Personnel Committee, which consists of myself, Councillors Cullen, Desjardins, and Chaboyer, and as these are time-sensitive matters due to some other unforeseen circumstances, 2 of the committee members, Councillors Desjardins and Chaboyer, could not attend, so we proceeded to have this discussion, knowing that the Personnel Committee doesn't have the authority to ratify or anything. We've just sort of discussed matters, and the matters are brought to full council. Anyways, we felt that it should proceed to that way, and so I just wanted to say that in deference to Councillors Desjardins and Chaboyer, that they were not able to participate in the discussion, which is uncharacteristic. So I didn't want anybody to think that Councillor Cullen and I were trying to just pull a fast one here, but hopefully that the other 2, and this is consistent with the prior discussions that we've had as a Personnel Committee in terms of setting a mandate. And discussion was made that it's always favorable to have a negotiated settlement and ratified by the bargaining group, and then of course presented and such to City Council. Personnel Committee, those of us that could discuss it, did feel that it was consistent with some of the settlements that we've been having, consistent with probably the marketplace, and given the importance, obviously, all of our bargaining groups are to the city and the citizens, that we felt that this was a suitable settlement to recommend to council. And I'm not sure, and I certainly invite Councillor Cullen to weigh in, and certainly the other members of the Personnel Committee if they had any comments to make, and then we would open the floor to questions of Council as a whole. So I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add.
No, Your Worship, I think you've covered it all.
Yeah. And Councillor Desjardins, go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, thank you, through your worship. Great work on this, Linda. And, you know, one of the interesting things for me, so this is my question to you, is how common is it for us to have, you know, wage increases every 6 months as opposed to every year? Is this like something that's happening in other places, or is this something that, you know, I just find it an interesting part of the negotiation, and I'm certainly in favor of the agreement, but curious how that all transpired.
Through your worship to Councillor Desjardins, it's not something we often do in Brandon. It has been done before. I have only been involved in one before in my 25 years at the city, where we've done it, and it was really a kind of I'll call it a correction year with transit, where we tried to get them off the mid-year increases and go to calendar year increases. But this was part of to be honest, a very productive bargaining session with the union in regards to the 911 contract. And, obviously the unions are looking for increases that are somewhat in line with cost of living. We all know that that's a hot topic on everybody's minds right now. And so this was just as a result of discussions where, council's trying to be fiscally responsible and keep those wages in line, but at the same time acknowledge that, we're under some cost of living pressures right now.
Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. I will say I'm once again very pleased to see that we negotiated this. That's always good, because this is 2 negotiations in a row that we've done with fire, paramedic and firefighter. Also did kind of wonder about the 2 a year. It does look a little bit different. It seems like it's a little bit of it's just unusual. But I do have like ongoing concerns, and I always lose these fights. And if it was the police, we'd be talking about. I see the chief over there, and usually his hand would go down to his hip as I start talking. But it does sound like most economists are talking about a recession in the next 2 years, and this is one of these big long-term beefs that I got to maybe just get over. But it used to be that the public sector had good wages and secure in their jobs. But they were good wages. The private sector often paid a lot more, but there's instability, which we see all the time with the instability of the private sector. It's often compared, the private sector is compared to on their best days, but we know that if we go into recession, private sector often doesn't get increases. Sometimes you don't hang on to jobs. So one of these things that I historically look at the city of Brandon, we've never done zeros, we've never done freezes. Provinces do, federal government does, private sector does more than freeze at times. When the economy goes bad, sometimes they just simply disappear as a whole company, let alone the staff. So again, glad that we negotiated this in, but it's constant. When we do our budgets constantly, you can guarantee that people are going to get taxed, and we've kept them very low. But working with the city, you're getting paid more. Year in, year out, the economy doesn't matter. And in these areas, these are good jobs now. This isn't the 40 years ago when it was like, a good working with the city, guaranteed work. This is good. These are well-paid jobs in our city now. I just, little note I want to make every time we come up with this. We go to the vote, I lose, but I just kind of always want to know that, when the private sector does say, geez, it seems like a pretty good gig at the city, they're not necessarily wrong. It's a pretty good gig. So that's my statement once again. You don't want to answer
Get it
that.
on the table, yeah. And just to clarify, this is for the E911 dispatch section only. This isn't fire and paramedic.
Oh, yeah.
they're the ones that
negotiate.
represent them, but we are in negotiations with them, but this is only for the E911 operators only, just so nobody's
So I just
confused.
upset them.
Pardon?
I just upset them.
Well, you'll have probably a chance at others coming up. Okay, other questions or comments? Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship, and it's more so when it comes to the vote. Although I don't have a financial impact on it or a financial concern in it, I do have a family member that is an E911 dispatcher, so I'll just abstain from the vote if I could.
Okay, any other discussion? If not, we'll just ask Linda to hang around. We should take a motion that's at the tail end of this report then, if somebody would like to propose that. Councillor Desjardins.
Thank you, through your worship. I move that the City of Brandon enter into a 2-year agreement with the Brandon Paramedics and Firefighter Association Local 803 for the period January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2023, as per the Memorandum of Settlement, whereby general wages shall be increased as follows: January 1, 2022, 1.25, January 1st, 2022, 1.25, January 1st, 2023, 1.25, and July 1st, 2023, 1.25.
There, please. Councillor Chaboyer. Movers to speak. Any other discussion? Just by way of math, and I didn't mention this in the Personnel Committee, it was mentioned that this, again, might be a little bit creative or unusual, having this kind of 6-month thing, so the 1.25 compounded out or averaged out to 1.89 for the year. So if you wanted to, you're getting only 1.25 for half of the year, and you're getting another point. So that was the math on a year. So just 1.89 in the face of the kind of inflation numbers you hear that are bouncing up and down, is probably not unreasonable. Is there any other discussion before we ask the question? All the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried with Councillor Cameron abstain. Thank you very much. Now we can have you come back on part 2 of this. Ms. Poole.
Thank you. So at the same meeting held on May 9th, 2022, the committee begs leave to report as follows and submits recommendations where deemed necessary and expedient. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss the tentative agreement with the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1505. Negotiations commenced in March, with a settlement being reached on May 10th, 2022, which was ratified by the union membership on May 13th, 2022. The negotiated settlement is within mandate, and highlights include general wage increases of 1.5% on January 1st, 2022, 1.5% on January 1st of 2023, and 1.75% increase on January 1st, 2024. There's been a small increase to the clothing allowance. There have been efficiencies gained in overtime distribution, which does reduce the overall cost of operations, and it's a 3-year contract set to expire on December 31st, 2024. So the proposed settlement is now being presented to City Council for consideration and decision, inclusive of administration's recommendation as follows: that the City of Brandon enter into a 3-year agreement with the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1505 for the period January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2024, as per the Memorandum of Settlement, whereby general wage increase shall be increased as follows: January 1st of 2022, 1.5%, January 1st, 2023, 1.5%, and January 1st, 2024, 1.75%.
Thank you. And we'll open up the floor again for questions, and then following that we will take a motion, and then we can debate it or discuss it if you wish. So, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Poole. If you could just give Council a little bit more insight into the efficiencies gained on the overtime. I know that mention in there is, I'm sure Council and the city as a whole would be interested to learn in benefits of that.
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Cameron. So seniority is a very important factor for ATU, and their overtime offerings, have had different iterations over the years, but seniority has always been kind of a factor, and that doesn't always
mean that the least expensive person to work the overtime is the one who's called first. And so we were able to rearrange that call-out order a little bit so that let's go the other way, the most expensive overtime person is, called later in the call-out order. So, we're not spending the most possible money filling overtime, and in many cases are able to fill it with the most efficient person.
Perfect. Thank you. Other questions? Okay. Do we have any other questions? So we'll take a motion. Councillor Cullen, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the City of Brandon enter into a 3-year agreement with Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1505 for the period of January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2024, as per the Memorandum of Statement, whereby wages shall be increased as follows: January 1st, 2022, 1.5%, January 1st, 2023, 1.5%, and January 1st, 2024, 1.75%.
Seconder, please. Councillor Chaboyer. Who wishes to speak?
No, thank you. I think we've had the report.
Okay. Any other discussion? I will point out the previous settlement was really for a 2-year period. This is for a 3-year period, and Personnel Committee felt that there's always a benefit of having multi-year agreements because it just sort of provides labor stability for a period of time. And it was also noted in this particular case that as the term of this council is coming to an end this October, some reticence to want to impose a very long contract on a future council. So both of these felt like they were sort of in the kind of reasonable territory. By the same token, you don't necessarily want to have a new mayor and council just get elected and 2 months later be into contract negotiations if you could help it. Sometimes that does happen just based on timing of some of these. But again, both of these will provide a little bit of breathing room for the next council without committing them too far into it. So that wasn't mentioned earlier, and I did want to just acknowledge that was discussed at the Personnel Committee. So if there's not any further discussion, then I think we're ready for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And I think that has it. Thank you very much, Ms. Poole. Well done on another couple. Next item, please.
I believe we have a verbal report from the Poverty Committee, Your Worship.
And Councillor Lukey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our Poverty Committee met last Wednesday, May the 11th. Hope Switzer from Brandon Neighborhood Renewal Corporation shared information on the Downtown Ambassador Program. This year there will be 3 ambassadors at 35 hours per week. Their role is to help promote downtown and make it a welcoming place. They do small events like coffee hours, Rainbow Day, yoga in the park, and movie nights. We were provided an update on the Everyone Eats program that is closing down near the end of May. The John Howard Society is shifting their focus to the food rescue store, and the new location at 719 Rosser Avenue did open this past weekend. Information was shared about Huddle, the new youth wellness hub located at 7th and Rosser Avenue. I believe His Worship did attend the opening of that. I also was able to take a tour of that later on in that same day, and I think several other councillors may have done so as well. We have also heard information Housing Day in Winnipeg that was put on the Manitoba Nonprofit Housing Association and was attended to by our Affordable Housing and Wellness Coordinator. 3 main topics were discussed and relayed to MLAs of the various parties. Those included retrofitting old buildings and accessing funds direct from the federal government for those retrofits, Indigenous housing strategy, and housing and supports. And we also looking forward to welcome a new member to our committee next month, pending support and approval from council later tonight.
Very good. Great report. We'll open up questions that anybody might have of Councillor Lukey and the Poverty Committee. Not seeing any. I, for one, do appreciate these committee reports we get from all of the committees, and they're always very thorough, and glad to have them. And so I guess we can move on to the next reports. Go ahead, please.
I believe we have a verbal report from the Brandon Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee, Your Worship.
And Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to submit the report on behalf of the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee. The Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee did meet on May 11th, 2022, and with the COVID pandemic beginning in 2020, much of the city's related heritage work had been put on hold, as did a number of these meetings. However, with the restrictions lifting, the committee had an opportunity to resume some of its activities and programs. The key items to resume are Doors Open Brandon, uptake for the Municipal Heritage Incentive Program, and uptake for Municipal Heritage Site plaques. So first on the Doors Open, this is the 20th edition of Doors Open, and coincidentally occurs in the same year as Brandon's 140th anniversary. The city has hired a heritage marketing coordinator who has started work in early May, and Doors Open takes place itself July 15th to 17th, and it's an opportunity to get out there and learn some about the heritage in our community, and not in a virtual sense, which is nice to have. Secondly, we discussed the Municipal Heritage Incentive Program. The city did send out letters to owners of municipal heritage sites in early 2021 and follow up regarding maintenance inspections with the intent to identify opportunities for such owners to take advantage of this program. Circumstances, obviously, with the pandemic did not allow the city to complete further follow-up, but we are looking forward to relaunching that program soon. Lastly, the same with the Municipal Heritage Site plaques. Circumstances obviously did not allow the city to follow up with a number of owners on municipal heritage sites that still do not have plaques, but that's something the committee will look at as well. And lastly, I wanted to congratulate Matthew May, who is appointed the community co-chair of the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee once again. So I submit that report to Council.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Cameron. Any questions to Councillor Cameron about this report? I'm glad you acknowledged some of the activities that will tie into our Brandon's 140th birthday. We will be doing a video about that tomorrow, I think it is, where we don't have a huge celebration for every 5-year iteration and whatnot, but it is nice to mark them in some ways, and that would be a great addition to that. So thanks for that, Councillor Cameron.
Coincidentally, Your Worship, I'll note through you to Council that it is also the 140th anniversary of Daly House Museum.
Right on. Days it feels like 140th anniversary of each of us, but it's just like this. And on to the next report.
You want to include that?
So we maybe cover these off, you mean the motion?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe what we will ask for before we go to the Downtown Safety and Wellness report, we'll ask if there were any other verbal reports, any committee reports we might not have been aware of, and we could take those now. Okay, not seeing any others. Then I think a motion would be in order to accept the Poverty and the Municipal Heritage Advisory Committee reports, if you would. Councillor Desjardins, and seconded by Councillor Lupke. Any discussion on that? Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, and then the next item, please.
We have a report from the chair of the Downtown Wellness and Safety Task Force.
As the chair of this very important committee is not a member of council, we're handling this obviously a little bit differently. So welcome to Mr. Tim Silversides, who's been providing tremendous service as our chair of this great committee.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council and everybody else. You said tremendous or horrendous? I'm not sure.
Said both.
Okay, please. I'm pretty low tech tonight. I think the first two presentations we had tonight did a good job of kind of presenting some of the things that we as a group are addressing on our regular meetings. Since the early part of November, we've had a number of different meetings. We had 4 education sessions, one with the service providers, one with the business community, one with the police and security people, and then one with planning and economic development. Above and beyond that, we had a half-day session that involved the whole committee where we looked and analyzed a number of the items that have been put on the table as far as addressing, which will include the 12 that we're looking at tonight. And on top of that, the work that happens in each one of those, we've had 2 meetings to put together the items that we're having tonight. And then we did a tour downtown, and I've gotten a bit of a reputation around the table as far as being a taskmaster, and we do an awful lot of homework with the people that are involved. And we've been very efficient with our time and getting a lot done in a short period of time, so we're very fortunate. The task force is comprised of 12 people with diverse backgrounds who are not only passionate about making a difference, but have little connection outside the task force. This diversity has made the initial development of synergies a little bit more challenging, but it's important in the identification and analysis of diverse solutions to some of the anomalies that we face in the downtown area. The 12 initiatives that we've been reviewing today, you will review today, are identified as areas requiring attention in most of the education meetings that we had. And they address all the concerns under the 3 pillars, wellness, social wellness, safety, and business development. These items could also be accommodated under the 2022 budget, so it worked out well that way. Some of these items are also pilot items that we will look at this year to see if it makes sense to continue them on in subsequent years. The task force is currently focusing on a variety of long-term solutions, which will either require partnerships with local service providers, downtown business community, or the other 2 levels of government, and could not be accommodated in the current year's budget. We plan on presenting these solutions in the meeting coming up later in the year. Short and sweet.
Very well. We're going to open up the floor to questions, and Tim is describing himself. He is cracking the whip, and he's describing himself as our high school math teachers. And I'm probably going to get a lot coming at me, and I'm probably going to be the worst offender for submitting my homework. And so, Mr. Doug Kinney, if you're watching, you'll know that I have not changed after 40 years away from my high school math teacher. So we'll open up the floor to questions of Mr. Silversides. Councillor Chaboy.
Thank you, Worship, through to the presenter, and thank your committee for all the work that you've done. It's an extensive list, but it's an important list. If we approve these recommendations, are you going to be implementing most of, all the programs that you're talking about, graffiti, garbage cans, all of them, ASAP?
Yeah, we don't, as a task force, we identify the initiatives that are going to make a difference in our downtown area. We don't make them happen.
Okay, so you're recommending to administration to make it happen ASAP.
I think maybe the city manager was going to try and help out there. Did you want to add into that?
I think Tim fielded that one well. Yes, the recommendation is to council, and then it'll be up to if council agrees to these 12 or amends them or doesn't agree to some of them, then we would be tasked to administer. But city staff have been involved all along, so we know what we can and can't do. Some of these are, when you see the word "we will do," that's because we know what's in the plan. We've already been working on it. We've got some legwork. Some of it is just a little bit of research. Some of these we may have to come back to council and say, okay, we can do this, but it won't happen till the fall or what have you. But we've been very involved, and Shannon Saltarelli has been trying to coordinate all the departments that are involved in this list as best she can.
And council will recall that at budget time, there were some of these initiatives that were possibilities, and council sort of globally provided the funds in the budget to be able to, do some of these. But as the task force was nicely underway, it was felt and agreed by council at the time that we wouldn't sort of usurp the work that they were doing, that we would allow the task force to sort of chew on all of this and to decide, which they felt would be meaningful soon or later, and so on and so forth, and, ask them to then take that and make the recommendations back to council. So the money is by and large already earmarked by council. We've allowed the task force to kind of collate all of the work that they've been doing and come up with this list, kind of bouncing it back to council, obviously, for their consideration. I think it's been a good process. Councillor Fawcett?
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. A couple of questions that might be for the city manager, maybe more so than Tim. And I do agree, he has been a touch of a taskmaster, which is very good, because as you know, between, Bruce and myself and yourself on there, you gotta herd the sheep. And I was late getting my stuff in, but my mom wrote him a note, so I was fine. There's some really obvious things on this list that are to be even brought to next year's budget, and that some of these washroom things and that we're looking at. But how quickly could we get back from administration, if we approve this, their responses and reactions to these things? Like a lot of them, I know we have benches that are going out. I know that we have additional garbages that are going out. Like, could it get back to council that, they'll be out by June? There's a lot of these things that the reason that the chair is here at this point is to try to get things here for spring, summer. Spring itself has hardly showed up, but we do want it to get out there as soon as we can, and expectations are that we maybe could. So is there a way of actually bringing it back to council just as information as to what we're doing, or even just as information back to our committee so that we could report it at the next council, something like that? But the expectation is by bringing it as early as we have with a lot of these, what we call sort of the low-hanging fruit, that they do get implemented. Follow up on that. We'll see them on the ground. We'll see it out there. But to just really know and say to the public, next time you're downtown, make sure you pick up your garbage because there's one not far from you.
You want to make some comment there?
Yeah, so through your worship to Councillor Fawcett, spring will come, I promise. Might be like SP, is all we have time for. So many of these items, like, it's our intent to, if they're approved tonight, to start on all of them now. Some of them are already set up. The ambassador program, for example, the first one, that will just happen. It's part of the process. The ones that were in the budget, so those 4 that's identified in the budget, we've already done some legwork on those, so those will be implemented fairly quickly. Graffiti management program, we've already started some work on that. The garbage, the totes are actually already ordered, or the garbage containers, I mean. So much of this can get going right away. Some of it doesn't even have to come back to council. Some of the ones that involve some research, it's going to take a little bit more time. So what I'm proposing with council is a couple things. Is you'll start getting those ones that require some research, and maybe we need some further council decision making. We'll come back to council individually, but also as the 12, we'll come back to council with, and I'm going to propose it periodically throughout the year, maybe a couple of times throughout the year. We'll provide council with an update. Here's the 12 items. Here's where we're at with those 12 items.
Fair enough.
Okay. We'll be coming and discussing the actual list here in a few minutes, so maybe come back. I do have Councillor Cameron as well, though.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Silversides. Appreciate the work of yourself and your group on this. Obviously, with projects like this or tasks like this, quite often when you bring in a bunch of different groups, the ideas that feed in there can be drastically different. Would you note, sort of anecdotally, where there's some synergies that came through from a number of different groups that sort of built these, or are they representative of a couple from each group, or how does the list sort of come to be?
Combination of the both. There are synergies that have been developed through discussions that we've had, but there's also some that representation of the group that they've come from representing. They're bringing some ideas from kind of that group, the business group or the Indigenous group, or we're seeing kind of a combination of both of them.
Excellent. No, through your worship, much appreciated for that, because like I say, quite often when you bring in a bunch of different ideologies or thought processes to make it to a concise list, kudos to your group for doing that.
Thanks for saying that. And I would acknowledge the presence of one of the committee members that's here with Tim, Janine Pelche, and of course Councillors Fawcett, Klupke, and myself. And we do get a lot of support from the city manager, the city clerk, and our housing and wellness coordinator, Shannon Saltarelli. And it's just a great group of people that, as you know, when we had the task of appointing them, we were kind of overwhelmed by the good people that had applied to take on this fairly difficult task. So it's kind of the way our community is wired, that they're prepared to pitch in. So this has come along quite well. And I have Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. Take a page out of Councillor Fawcett's book, just more of a comment or statement. And much like you just said, Your Worship, I think with the representation that we had from a variety of sectors, from nonprofit, from the business community, from the Indigenous community, from even representatives like ourselves, for a lot of us, we didn't know each other very well or very slightly as we got together as a group. So not only was it important for us to gain information, but it was important for us to get to know each other a little bit. And I'm very thankful and impressed with the kind of discussion we've had. It hasn't always been in agreement, and sometimes it's been passionate from a lot of people. And I think I don't like using the word low-hanging fruit because I think it makes it sound easy, and even coming up with these 12 wasn't as easy as it might appear. And I think it's only going to get tougher moving forward. And I think it's also important to know that as a group, we also faced what I felt was some unwarranted criticism and backlash from some groups that we reached out to. And I really feel like we had to persevere a little bit early in our sessions to come through with what we have so far, and we'll continue to do so. And I know Janine's here, and thank her and thank all the other people that are on that task force, because we have done some good work so far, and I think we have a lot of good work still to come.
Thanks very much. I'm glad you mentioned the term low-hanging fruit. It's getting to be my thing. How I got off, asked us to get off the word of the master plan thing. Just low-hanging fruit things getting to be in the same category. It's just overused terminology. But thanks, Bruce, for that. Councillor Giarley.
Thank you, through your worship. Thanks to the councillors on the committee, and to yourself, Mr. Silverside, and to Jadine, and everybody else that's put their time in there. A lot of this is thankless for sure, and you have to get into the weeds and get into some very difficult conversations with some very passionate individuals in our community, right, that have we don't always have the same solutions in mind. So that can definitely be challenging, and I commend all of you. Regarding the indicators, the measures of success, have we considered, has the task force looked at how the city should be measuring the success of these initiatives? Kind of indicators should we be looking at? Like, and I mean, I could think of some low-hanging fruit ones off the top of my head, right? We want to see a lower crime rate. We want to see property values go up. But have they talked about that? Because I think it would be interesting for us as a council and as public to see us, come up with some indicators, and we say, these things that we've implemented, they've gained traction, and we're seeing some benefit from these things.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that's, as you're going to see, as we're coming in with your next group of solutions, you're going to see recommendations in that direction, is making sure that the things that we want to see happen, and that the results are tangible, and we're seeing them happen.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions, comments? We are going to have a discussion here in a minute on the specific list, just a couple of agenda items down, so we won't be quite done yet, but thank you very much, Tim, for this presentation and for all you've done to coordinate this group. And well, we're not done yet, but it's been a rewarding task, I think, and we'll just carry on with it. So thank you very much, Tim. Okay, probably a motion to receive the report from the Brandon Downtown Wellness Safety Task Force would be in order, please. Councillor Desjardins, seconded by Councillor Cameron. Any discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
The order of inquiries, Your Worship.
Okay, we've got a number of them tonight, so Councillor Desjardins, lead us off.
Thank you, through your worship. The city recently removed 9 mature trees along 15th and 17th beside Louise Avenue. How soon can residents expect for those trees to be replaced? Additionally, can we get an update on how many trees we expect to plant this year versus how many will be removed for our canopy?
Very much. And our city manager, Mr. Ron Bowles, does have a response ready for you.
Through yourself, Your Worship, to Councillor Desjardins. The plan, this response comes from Bryce Wilson, so he is your Director of Parks, as well as Stephen Clark is your charge hand forestry and horticulture. The plan is to replace the trees that were removed in the neighborhood of 17th and 15th Street along Lorne and Louise Avenues next year. So that answers the first part of your question. When planting, we will ensure we are following proper spacing from streets, street lighting, existing trees, and underground infrastructure. So this might mean that some locations a tree might not be replaced, or that in some boulevards we may be able to replace 2 trees. All trees that were removed along Lorne and Louise were showing signs of severe decline, with the majority of the canopy being dead. With the high winds we have been receiving over the past few weeks, we ran the risk of the trees falling and causing damage to public. In most cases, the stumps that remain have large hollows in which shows the amount of decay that was in the trees. This year, the Forestry and Horticulture Department has 175 root ball trees ordered, plus 85 container trees ordered. This is a total of 260 trees the Parks Department will be planting in-house throughout the year, with the majority of them being planted in the spring. The Engineering Department has contracted an additional 175 root ball trees to be planted in new developments. So in total, this is 435 trees the city will be planting this year. So that answers the second part of your question. They go on to say, as for removals, it is never the intention to go and remove a tree without cause or justification. When a city crew arrives at a call-in location, inspection of the tree is done, an appropriate decision is made on whether the tree can be trimmed to alleviate the hazard or the tree has to be removed. With that, in 2022, there was no specific number of removals. To date, 45 trees have been removed since January. 189 in 2022, 189 trees were removed. 57 were from boulevards with the Dutch elm disease. In 2020, 241 trees were removed. 69 of those had the Dutch elm disease. Thank you.
Very much. Right.
Yeah, so thank you for that great, thorough response. I just had a couple of follow-up questions. If residents were, interested in expediting that tree replacement on city property, even, for example, is there a process within the city for that to happen? Could neighbors and residents pitch in, purchase trees, okay it with Parks? Parks, let us know if this tree's okay. Can we plant this one here? Parks says okay. Could they do that?
I'm looking at my colleagues behind me and nobody's shaking their head as they know the answer. So I'm going to say we'll have to get back to you on that. But it's a really good question, whether they can, say purchase a tree, but put it on our land and, yeah.
So that was my first question. My second one is when we remove the trees, so for disease or whatever the cause, for safety concerns, who is responsible for watering the tree? The reason I ask is we planted several trees in the past few years that are dead and are going to have to be removed in new residential areas and even along the Rosser Avenue and other areas. So my concern is that we're going to come replace these trees, but nobody's going to take the initiative to water the trees, and we're going to have to replace them again. So that's my second question.
Yeah, well, I'll take that one under advisement as well. But another good question, because you want the trees to live. If they're on the boulevards, obviously that's up to the city to, but your question is more pertaining to in front of somebody's home or their business.
Yeah. Both those things, yeah. Thank you.
Well, they do seem to, as you know, we've got a large watering truck and a large program, with the flower pots we put out there, and they're out there. And I think they do that with the trees, not to say they all survived. Like I've planted trees at home where you're watering them constantly and they don't all survive. So it will be good to get that answer back. And I'm with you on that we're spending a lot on trees and we want them to survive. So they have to be watered. Okay, and I think Councillor Berry was next.
Should we defer to Councillor Cameron to go first?
Councillor Cameron, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple this evening. The first one in our documentation that was emailed out is a duplication of one of Councillor Berry's questions. So I'll just flip over here. My first one this evening is I've been contacted by a number of residents recently who noted parking concerns around Valley View School. The parking lot on the north side is half full much of the time, but streets such as Whitehead Crescent and to a lesser extent Noonan Drive are full of staff vehicles for the neighborhood school. Normally throughout the summer months this is not an issue due to school being out, but this past winter created a lot of problems with snow clearing for residents. I know that parking on the street is not site specific to residences, but I do know a number of residents who are forced to walk sometimes more than a block to their house due to staff vehicles on the street, especially on Whitehead Crescent. I'm just wondering if perhaps we could reach out to the school division or discuss with our residents or the city some creative solutions to help alleviate some of the concerns before snow again causes issues with parking in proximity to the school.
Very good. Again, I think city manager is ready with the response for that.
Thank you. And through Mayor Crest to Councillor Cameron, you were talking about Valley View School, right?
That's correct. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So
in the documentation, it does talk about Parkdale.
Yeah,
but it's a duplication.
But I think the response is right.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So the absolutely, and we hear of the concerns of parking in non-summer months around some of the schools. It can be a bit of a theme. This response is provided to you by. I have to go to the right question now.
Yeah, the question kind of came out wrong, but if you want to use this.
On page 5.
I got it. Yeah, there it is. Oh, there it is. Yeah, thank you. So engineering services will be happy to meet with the school division to discuss parking. So absolutely, they'll be meeting with them to discuss options. And then Mr. Allard, Director of Engineering, goes on to say, as you know, street parking is not reserved for any one resident or neighborhood specifically. As with all public facilities, you should be under the premise of cooperation. They should be used under the premise of cooperation, fairness, and respect. Any efforts to restrict or limit parking along these streets would also apply to the neighborhood residents. So that is the struggle in trying to make sure that we're providing parking and good thoroughfares for the public at large, as well as the residents that live there. And that's the conversation that we'll be having with the school board. Thank you.
Thank you. My next one, if I may, Your Worship. Just wondering if City Council could get an update on the timeline for proposed changes to the nuisance bylaw requested in November 2021.
Very good. Back to Mr. Bowles.
Through Mayor Crest, again to Councillor Cameron. This response is provided by Heather Wozniak, Director of Legislative Services. As a request by Councillor Cameron, as requested by Councillor Cameron, a legal opinion was sought on what the city's options are in the course of action under the nuisance bylaw in order for the city to more effectively carry out enforcement actions. So 2 conflicting independent options were received regarding opinions for enforcement. A report to Council outlining these options have been delayed due to staff absences, but it is expected they will be coming to Council in June. Early June. And then the second part, community standards bylaw, which will provide in part for regulation of suppression of nuisances and maintenance of properties, is under review. So again, here there was a change in leadership at Brandon Police Service, and this delayed the drafting of the bylaw. However, the Review Committee is now ready to make final changes and present the same to Council prior to the end of June. So it looks like we'll be getting 2 reports on the nuisance bylaw.
Thank you, and I appreciate the work that's been undertaken thus far and will continue to be on that. So one more, if I may, Your Worship. With the work on 34th Street expansion reaching its final phases, I've heard from a couple of residents with regards to the condition of the lane south of McDonald Avenue. In 2021, due to construction vehicles and closure of the street due to road work, the lane took a bit of a beating. Residents are hopeful the city has a plan in place to replace the bed on the lane and gravel, as it is currently, it resembles unfortunately more of a mud trail than a passable laneway. Just hoping we could get an update on the timeline and any proposed work to fix that lane up.
Ken, thank you, and back to Mr. Bowles.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Cameron again. This response is once again from your Director of Engineering, Mark Allard. A strong asphalt surface always requires good positive drainage. The area between the new retaining wall and the green space south of the lane and the building and parking area is very tight, as you know. As we finalize drainage in this area in the month of June, Engineering Services will be developing a plan for resurfacing this lane while trying to maintain positive drainage away from the buildings and into the newly constructed catch basin. Engineering Services will meet with the condo board at that time to complete the plan. So as you know, we're completing that project here in the spring, so that it'll be a haste post. And then he just concludes with saying that the project budget does not contain this additional work, so that'll be something else that they'll be working on.
Perfect, thank you. And I will say, as a follow-up to that, I am glad to hear that Engineering Services plans to meet with the condo board, because I think it's important to have their sort of first-hand knowledge, but as well to have their input onto that final plan. So thank you.
You. And I think now we're back to Councillor Berry.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have 3 inquiries tonight. I'm actually going to start with number 2 on the list here tonight, so the milling and paving one. Could Council get a list from engineering of the streets that are going to have milling and paving work done during this construction season? Also, with the announcement from the provincial government this past week of the extra funds being given to cities for road repair, is this maybe a good opportunity for the city to get extra milling and repaving done to some streets that are in dire need of it? And will the administration take this under consideration of the use of these extra funds for road repairs?
Thank you for that. And to the last part, I was also doing a little happy dance when that came up, because we're always happy for additional funds to work on our infrastructure, but I'll turn it back over to Mr. Bowles.
Absolutely, and Director of Engineering Services Mark Allard has been very busy by this list. So thanks, Council, for this question. It's a good one. Engineering Services has been developing a comprehensive pavement prevention program for 2022 construction season. At this time of preparing this response, final modifications are still underway. Later this week, the week of May 16th, Engineering Services will be providing an electronic link to all of Council to access the preservation list, including the milling and filling projects. So it's more than just the projects you're asking for, Councillor. And then on to your second part of the question, Engineering Services is thrilled by the provincial funding announcement to support road repairs. Although it is not confirmed, we anticipate the funding to be approximately $500,000. I've heard a number higher than that. I will wait and see. While additional milling and pavement is certainly an option, administration remains unclear as to what the overall criteria set by the province of our spending is for these funds. Engineering Services and the operations departments will be meeting in the coming weeks to determine various options and how to best use to best improve the overall network this year.
Thank you. My number 3 inquiry here is to deal with Parkdale Park, and this is the inquiry I put forth today is just more to settle some rumors that are going around the neighborhood, because I've had several inquiries about what's going on with the play structure coming down. It's getting a little bit crazy. So I thought I'd bring this up tonight so we could have an official response. So I have received some inquiries over the past couple of weeks from residents that either live around or use Parkdale Park. And with the demolition of the wooden play structure, which we knew was going to happen, that's not a surprise. When the new one was built, we knew the old wooden one would be coming down. Residents and park users are wanting to know if there's a plan to either replace the structure with one designed for more preschool age children or some other recreation structure like a splash park or a skateboard park. That's kind of the stories that have been floating around. So I just wanted to get an official response from administration on that.
Okay, and Mr. Bowles, we're ready for you.
Through your worship to Councillor Berry, or a sandbox. This response is provided by Bryce Wilson, your Director of Parks. Parks Department has removed the old play structure, as you know, completed just over a week ago. Unfortunately, the structure was no longer safe for use. The border around the sand and the sand itself will remain. The Parks Department will also top off with some fresh sand. So at this current time, there's no plans for the area except for it to remain as a large play sandbox.
Thank you for that response, and I hope it does become a sandbox and not a litter box for neighborhood cats around there and that, so otherwise we'll be dealing with something else, but I think the neighborhood will like that. My first question here is to deal with the Willowdale Ditch dredging work. It's a follow-up for a previous inquiry on April 4th. I made that inquiry at the council meeting, and I hadn't received a response yet as to what was happening, whether the tender has gone out for the dredging, it's been looked into, etc. And can I get an update on the dredging work for the Willowdale Ditch that had funds added in the 2022 budget and was passed by council for that work to be performed this year?
Okay, and back to Mr. Bowles.
Absolutely. So through Mayor Chris to Councillor Berry, thank you for this question. This response, Councillor Paul Ziesman, Manager of Underground Utilities. City of Brandon Underground Utilities Department has reviewed the concern and will provide a complete update and report on the Willowdale maintenance and long-term strategy before the outlined deadline of May 19th of this year. However, our plan is to focus on additional funds on improving the grass cutting maintenance, and grade improvements, and long-term water modeling study to better understand capacity and impacts of rain events.
Let me follow up, Your Worship. I don't know if I missed something here. Maybe I can get some help from the city clerk. This was a motion that was passed a budget by council, funds allotted by council specifically for a dredging project on Willowdale Ditch. It wasn't for a plan, it wasn't for grade improvements, it wasn't for grass cutting. It was to dredge the ditch. I want to know how a motion that was passed by council, funds allotted to it, could suddenly change into an answer like this, where they're not even doing the work that was directed to them by council.
Your Worship, I can confirm, as Councillor Berry stated, the motion was for $100,000 for the dredging of the Willowdale ditch from White Shell to 22nd Street, and that was passed by council.
Thank you.
And then I believe, one note, your inquiry was actually April 19th. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, but it was
an
an inquiry on the status of the tender for that project.
Okay, thank you for that information. So, Your Worship, I'm going to go back through you. We want the work done that was passed by council. I'm not asking for extra grass maintenance or anything else done because it's not getting done anyway. That's supposed to be regular stuff we're doing, not extra stuff. The $100,000 funds was not for that stuff. It was to have the ditch dredged, which, by the way, was a suggestion made by you at our meeting last year in the summer, and it was a great idea. The ditch has become too low in capacity. It needs to be dredged. So I think you can tell I'm just a little bit upset about this response and the fact that council's wishes that were passed are not being followed. And if this is going to be the game going forward, I just want to know, because we might have to change the way we do things here at council table then if our motions and our wishes aren't going to be carried out.
Yeah, so I'm not sure whether...
Yeah, absolutely. So I can't speak to this specific project or this inquiry, but I will say to council, just because you were talking about process, Councillor Berry, the process is when a capital project is approved by council, it's approved by council, and that, it sits on that table. It's given to staff to your city administration to action it. So, from time to time, projects get canceled or they change, but they change at the hand of council. So if there's a material change here, and I don't know the details of this one, then it needs to come back to council.
But nothing changed here from council. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't know.
Why did this get changed on council's motion to have the ditch dredged? and funds were put forth to it. That's what I don't understand, why this has taken a total turnaround from what I asked a month ago.
So I think we'll allow the city manager to take this back and sort through it. You know, that there's a approved motion for works to be done, and we'll let him sort it out and get back to us to kind of solidify this project.
Appreciate that. I'd appreciate a fairly quick response if at all possible too, because again, doing it in October when the rains have stopped is pointless, so.
Good.
How about next meeting?
Sure. That's good.
And Mr. Pulak, I think, might have something there.
So, through your worship to Councillor Barry, so there is a report coming. It won't be here by next meeting. It'll be here by May 19th. So you will have a report outlining what they're discussing. And to be honest with you, what's going to come out in the report is not saying we don't do the project, but to provide an explanation as to where we are and to make a recommendation to council. So we are not canceling the project.
Okay, then in that case, your worship, through you, maybe a little more clarity on the response needs to be made, because it sure made it sound like that money was going to be used for other stuff, which was not the intention of council.
Absolutely, through your worship to Councillor Barry, the wording of the response can be misleading. What we are going to be coming back to council with that's in this report is recommendations based on some work that we've done since that was approved by council. And at that point, we will be looking at council as to how you would like to proceed. And this will be in this report that's forthcoming in the next few days.
Okay. Thank you, your worship. I just hope going forward that we don't have money set aside for playgrounds that we've allotted this year and it winds up going into tree planting or something like that. And we've made plans for them. That's what we do at budget time. That's the part I don't understand, is when we do a budget, we spend a lot of time, some of the councillors here, a lot of time going through that budget, making recommendations, trying to put money forth or taking money out for different projects. And then when budgets finally pass, we're finding out that the money's not being used for things that we've asked for and passed. And it just gets frustrating.
Yeah. Well, it does sound like it's in the works, and I think we'll all be quite interested to see what the...
Yeah, well, I'm going to leave it at that, because I think they can tell that this really, really upset me today when I saw this.
Okay. That was the last year inquiries?
Oh, I think everybody's going to be pleased that was the last of my inquiries. Yes.
Okay, and now sometime, those were the inquiries we were aware of. Sometime there are other inquiries, I call them audibles, that did come up later in the day, and we could take those now if there are any. Seeing none, we can move on to the next item, please.
The order of announcements, your worship.
Any announcements this evening? Councillor Lukey.
Thank you, your worship. Earlier today, several members of council, his worship, and some of our senior staff were able to attend a presentation on reconciliation with Tim Olone. And we thank the Brandon Urban Aboriginal Peoples Council and Michelle for setting that up. I just want to remind the public that Tim Olone, who is a former advisor to the Honorary Murray Sinclair, who is chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, will be speaking publicly this Friday, May the 20th, at the Brandon Friendship Center at 205 College Street. The presentation starts at 7. There will be supper at 6 ahead of that presentation. And I think it would be an enlightening experience for anyone that wanted to attend that presentation. And I do have a second one, your worship, if I may. I know this is a ways away, but it does come up prior to our next council meeting. Arbor Day presentation event will be taking place at the Keystone Center at the Clara Tent, which is the area just south of 13th Street and actually in the Patmore Forest area. Among the things taking place for the Arbor Day presentation on June the 4th from 10 to 2 are free tree seedlings, free wood chips, free draws. There's education booths, children activities, tree planting demonstrations, tree climbing demonstrations, music, food trucks, a guided tree ID tour, etc. So it should be an interesting day, and there are any residents that want to take advantage of Councillor Desjardins' recommendation of planting trees themselves, this might be a good opportunity to get a tree and learn how to plant it properly. So it should be a good day on Arbor Day, June the 4th.
Very good. Other announcements? Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two as well. It's a night of twos, if I may. So, first and foremost, Valley View School is holding a yard sale fundraiser. All proceeds to support the school. This this yard sale is taking place Saturday, May 28th, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. And they are looking for drop-off of donations still. There's a couple of dates that are available on the Valley View Centennial School Facebook page. That being Friday, May 27th is their next drop-off date. But you can find out all the information on their Facebook page, and all proceeds once again go to support the school and initiatives for the students there. So, and my second one, if I may, Your Worship, both yourself and I had the opportunity to attend the long service recognition event this morning, so I will actually let you speak to that one.
Oh, go ahead.
No. Very, very briefly, just an excellent opportunity to celebrate 18 members of the police force that now have 20 years of service or more, including Chief Wayne Balkin, who joins us this evening with 30 years of service or more, and 40 years of service to Inspector Mark Elaine. There was also an opportunity to recognize a number of citizen recognition awards as well as exemplary service, but I will let Your Worship finish that one off. So.
Yeah, well, you've capped it off. It was the police service had so many organizations were not able to have these kind of ceremonies for a little while due to COVID, so there was a little bit of a pent-up number of great awards provided to police service for a long service, several commendations, exemplary service awards, favorable notice awards, and several citizen awards, as well as an award provided by MAD, which was Mothers Against Drunk Driving, that was provided to a constable for his efforts towards the kind of fight against drunk driving. And so Councillor Cameron is probably being a bit modest that one of these citizen recognition awards was provided to his sister in a kind of a life-saving capacity, and so there was a number of those. So it was quite heartwarming to see that, and just a great day to see such a large number of Brandon Police Service members that were recognized for many exhibits of distinguished service. So it was quite a good session this morning. So thank you very much, Chief, for inviting us to that. It was certainly a good presentation. And other announcements? Not seeing any others. We can move on to the next item, please.
Under the order of general business, Your Worship, we have the recommendations from the Downtown Wellness and Safety Task Force.
Very good. So we've had a discussion following Mr. Silverside's presentation to council. So a lot of this would be my recommendation to, although this might be a poor analogy, this given moment, I was going to say that we would treat this like a budget deliberation, but maybe we've got a bad taste in our mouth after our inquiry session. But
may not get followed.
That we would just put the entire motion, just wouldn't have to read them all out, just sort of as presented, put the entire motion on the table, and then allow councillors to amend and to tweak or to delete portions that they don't like, as opposed to trying to go through these individually. It'd be like when we table the budget, we table it in its entirety, and then we just make the amendments as we see fit. So if somebody wanted to do that, it would be Councillor Lupke. Go ahead, please.
How did you want to word this, Your Worship?
I guess that the recommendation of the Downtown Wellness and Safety Task Force, as per the list noted, be approved.
I will move that Council adopt the recommendations put forward by the Downtown Wellness and Safety Task Force that are presented on tonight's agenda.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Desjardins. Whoever wishes to speak, you don't have to lead off, but you can.
I would I guess I'll speak briefly. I think these recommendations have been discussed, some quite easily, and passed by our, and just so council understands that all these were put forward as motions and passed by the task force as a whole, so it wasn't that we're just recommending them. There actually was some discussion and passed by our task force at our meetings. And I think all are good recommendations that we should be adopting. So I personally would be in favor of adopting all 12, but certainly leave it open for the rest of council to discuss and amend as you may see fit.
Thank you. And Councillor Jarley.
Through your worship, I would strongly echo those statements made by Councillor Lupke. I want to give the task force credit for the work they've done, and also give them my faith, right, that they have done their diligence here, and that the 12 recommendations that we have in front of us were agreed to through healthy dialogue and discussion, and they've done what we've asked them to do, and I can't see anything here that I wouldn't be supportive of. Hopefully it all works, and hopefully we get some results, the results that we're hoping for. This isn't the end of the work from the task force, and this isn't the end of the work that we're going to need to do in the downtown, but this is certainly a step in the right direction. We see what's here, so I am a little concerned that the residents haven't seen it, so I don't know if the Brandon Sun's going to see it, but I mean, the fact is there's 12 great initiatives here, the Downtown Ambassador Program, bringing the benches back, adding refuse and recycling bins, getting the a maintenance program done for public spaces, a community clean street program, graffiti program, sidewalk infrastructure and redevelopment, and then several others that will take some time, but that will hopefully be initiating in the not too distant future. So thank you to the task force, and I'll be supporting all the 12.
Thank you. Well, thank you for paraphrasing it. It does occur to me now that if somebody's watching the broadcast, they don't necessarily have the copy of the agenda, so I'm glad you paraphrased many of these great projects, and they're things that can be done fairly immediately, and as the city manager earlier indicated, they're kind of geared up. This was kind of a marriage of the task force discussing these, but with input from administration in terms of items that can be done and are necessary and the like. So thanks for highlighting some of these, and if other councillors want to highlight others, that's totally fine. Councillor Parker?
Thank you, Worship. Just quickly, if I could ask, the sum of all these parts, will the dollar amounts fall within the urban renewal operating budget? We're not exceeding that particular budget, is that correct? Thank you.
Is that just a nod?
Yeah, I got a nod. 3 nods.
Got a nod from the city manager as well. So, yeah.
If I may, Your Worship, the other part of that, of course, with some of the recommendations like the rehabilitation of the downtown sidewalks, we did have infrastructure dollars that were set aside that were originally earmarked for council's remembrance for angled parking that were then opened up for other capital projects. So that sidewalk deliberation would come from, I believe it was $150,000 that was set aside for infrastructure projects as part of the task force mandate.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Fawcett?
Yeah, thank you. And also through your worship, there is of note a few things in there that are mentioned to be presented for the 2023 budget.
Right. Yeah, there are certainly some things that will get to be done right away, and others are going to require more research that will come back to council for inclusion in the future budget, or get council's input on that. Go ahead.
Yeah, again, through your worship, I'm also going to comment a little bit on this because this is something we wanted to bring forward. As Chair Silversides had said earlier, like both those presentations that were brought to us hours ago from Kim Longstreet and from Amica are part of our bigger picture as well. So there's a lot of that we're dealing with, because one is the development of downtown, as in, commercial development and housing. The other is we have some obvious health issues in our course, so we're working with that. None of that's kind of addressed particularly in here. But we are meeting again tomorrow night, and we're starting to tackle those larger. This was let's get this stuff ready for spring.
Other comments? Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Worship. As I mentioned earlier, I'm in favor of all these recommendations, and I look forward to future reports from the task force, specifically on a constituency that I'm concerned about and have been concerned about from day one as representing, being the only woman on council, that I want to ensure that women feel safe visiting and working downtown. And so I hope, as you continue your discussions, that there is robust plans and discussions around making women feel safe to be downtown 24/7. Thanks.
Thank you. You'll recall, and you'll be pleased to know that we do have more female voices around the task force table than we do, unfortunately, around this table. So we are well served in that regard on this task force. So. Other questions or comments? We're ready. I'm not hearing that anybody wants to make any amendments, so I'm going to take it from that we will certainly be voting on the list in its entirety. So I believe we're ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you to Tim and Janine for your great work on that. And as Councillor Bossett put it, coincidentally, we have a meeting tomorrow evening, so you'll be able to report back to the committee that their work is being taken seriously, and we're moving on with many of those. So thank you very much. So next item, please.
The Council Chamber Audio Visual Project, Your Worship.
Okay, now I know we do have members of administration here that are either ready to answer questions or make a presentation, perhaps. I'm not sure what the plan was.
I think we're just going to answer questions if required.
Okay. I never like to preempt somebody that's got a presentation already, and then I just go barreling through it. So what is Council's wish? Would somebody like to put this on the table for discussion? Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Worship. I move that a maximum of $50,000 be transferred from the Information Technology Reserve to the Council Expenses Operating Account to fund the upgrade to the Council Chamber's audio-visual system.
Seconder, please. Councillor Frangi. Mover wish to speak?
I think it's fairly straightforward, Your Worship, and I'm always happy to speak to audio-visual requirements. So.
Yeah, I think we might be served, and the public would be, if administration did want to just give us a wee highlights, a little bit of an overview of it, if that'd be all right. I'm not sure if it's Jason that would be doing that, or...
I can sort of explain the project, and then perhaps Mr. Kluski can answer some of the technical questions. That's okay? So over the last 2 years with the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, we've had an increase of use of technology and virtual platforms such as Teams in order to do our business in a safe and effective manner. However, this current system that we are using, especially in the council chamber, is not without a few snags, especially when we're trying to hold a hybrid type meeting where we have some people on Teams and some people in the actual council chamber. And so we have done some discussions with the information department, technology department, about what options we might have. And they have done some research into what would be required to integrate the system to allow a much better flow between Teams participants and using the technology within the chamber. And I'll let Jason get into the specifics, if that's okay. But what we are looking at is that because this was not included in the financial plan for 2022, which is why we're here before council, we would have to get approval for funding of this project from one of the reserves, and the reserve that makes the most sense is the Information Technology Reserve. It is not without some thought, because the Information Technology Reserve, while it is very robust this year, has a very healthy starting balance. There's a number of projects that have been approved by council to come out of there. So we want to make sure that we continue to have enough funds for future years' service. So we may have to look down the road. I think we're okay for the first couple, 2 or 3 years, but there may be an opportunity where council may have to look at increasing the appropriation to that reserve in the future. But with that being said, if Mr. Kolesky is okay, if he wants to just go through the technical components.
Good afternoon, or evening, I guess. Leadership and council. Yes, so this current system that was installed pre-pandemic, and then when the pandemic struck and everyone started using Teams and not, we used some of the tools on hand, and we kind of makeshift and duct taped. That's the technical term. So the components, and you guys basically all saw the results of that. The system worked when either everyone was, attending remotely, or when everyone was here. But when it was a mix of both, I know during budget deliberations, there was some hiccups. Mostly because the system wasn't set up to host kind of virtual and Teams. So the solution that we're proposing is not a forklift. It's adding components. We've myself, I'm not a big AV geek, but we've consulted with Zach has consulted with everyone and with some of our vendors to come up with the components that we would need to augment the system so that it would be very much more seamless. I know people attending via Teams at home wouldn't always be able to see, what you see on the monitors right now. In this new solution, they would be able to, it would be just like attending a regular Teams, see and hear everything. There wouldn't be that delay, that echo that people attending from home experienced. It would also augment and help the switching of the different feeds. So Amber's life would get much easier for, in the event, not only if council needed to attend remotely, but also if presenters that would be presenting remotely from. So that's kind of just in the nutshell. So any questions?
Very good. We've got a couple of hands up. So Councillor Lupke, then Councillor Cullen so far.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to our presenter, or to Ms. Wazik. I remember having a brief discussion about the upgrades to the system here in council chambers, and one of the things we talked about was if we were going to upgrade to see about adding closed captioning or things that would help improve for those that are hearing impaired or visually impaired. And I'm not sure if that's covered under this system or if that's a different system where that could be possible.
So through Your Worship to the Councillor, no, this part is just dealing with remote Teams. That would be a future component that we would have to, that we're going to look at. But this specific one, one of the reasons we kind of wanted to get on the go with this is there is a bit of lead time. Everything supply chain right now is kind of a little bit backlogged. So there's, about a 3-month, 4-month type of a deal where to get the equipment, get it installed, get it going before the fall. I don't want to read the tea leaves or anything, but we want to be prepared, so do it now type of thing. So no, this just deals with.
Thank you.
And Councillor Cullen, then Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. It was also mentioned that it was brought up with the Age-Friendly Committee on the closed caption piece, and so I would recommend that maybe just as you're looking at the new system, that maybe if there's a one that's has sort of a module that could be attached to it or something, or easily expanded, if there was an option between two systems or two pieces of software, that, just to make sure that that was on your radar, that that has been something that's been requested and probably needs to be dealt with in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. Just for clarity's sake, is it Teams alone that it's going to be able to adapt to, or because it is? Okay, well that's all right. So we would be able to just sort of, because Teams is what we use all the time, but a lot of others will use the Zooms or the Meetups or whatever the heck they do. But because I think that, you know, hopefully we don't need to ever go back into all of us meeting that way, but obviously that hybrid has become a pretty interesting and valuable asset. So, for example, our provincial partners, if we could meet more regularly with them without driving all the time and have a very efficient, it would just be as long as whoever we're meeting with can adapt to Teams, which most can.
Through your worship to the councillor, yes, and I mean, how our Teams is set up, the clerks can send out an invite. They don't have to purchase anything. You don't need to install anything. You can do it from your browser if you wanted to. So yes, this won't.
Yeah.
Are able to use Teams.
Excellent. Excellent.
Any other questions of Mr. Zalewski? I think that's got it covered. Thank you to both you and Zach for being here and being prepared to answer questions on this. So back to the motion on the floor as moved by Councillor Cameron, seconded by Councillor Frangi. Any other discussion? I'll chime in. I was going to ask, there weren't really questions, and I will concede I'm a little concerned about the cost of this, and then I'm thinking, okay, like how much utility, how many hybrid meetings we're going to have and whatnot, although then the tail end of Councillor Fawcett's questions that he was asking then did inspire me. Well, I guess we could probably use this for more things to be interfacing, and so I wouldn't want to stand in the way of progress by voting against it. Sadly, as we're try not to get used to, but lots of things that we have to do at the city cost more than we would like them to. This would be one of those in that category for me. Like I'm thinking we got to just take away the duct tape and put in a few little gizmos there, and it's 50 grand. So I will end up voting for this because I think it is important that we're as well set up for this and to really accommodate others that may need to join us virtually, and that we can have a proper meeting. Admittedly, budget for one was, you know, we had some difficulties with a couple of presenters early on, and it was difficult for council to get the information and be able to make important decisions. So if this kind of gets us tuned up, then I guess I can be convinced that that's the way to go. Any other comments or questions before we call the question? Not seeing any, then we will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
It's a review of the animal control bylaw number 5900.
Okay, and what is council's wish?
That'll be.
Go ahead, Councillor Jarley.
Thank you. Through your worship, I'm wondering if there's somebody here that wanted to speak to the process before we
do that. The chief has probably
been here for 3 hours waiting for this opportunity.
We bring him up before or after we put a motion on the floor.
20 years and 3 hours.
Rhyme or reason. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Council. This was requested a while back for us to bring a report to Council. During that time, we had a transition in our traffic bylaw section, and the supervisor retired out of that area, and a new supervisor came in. So we had to give a little bit more time for the new supervisor to review the bylaw and dig a little bit deeper into this. Initially, I believe this report came to Council asking for us to look at a few of the areas, and then it morphed a little bit further into a review of the whole bylaw itself. So with your package, you would have received some of our options for tonight, as well as looking at the bylaw itself, as well as bringing a couple other amendments forward that will really modernize the animal control bylaw. It's been a while since this has been updated. So our team at Brandon Police Service took a look at this using the expertise of some of our animal control officers as well as some of the community members, and looked at holistically how this is going to work for us. We also reviewed Winnipeg Animal Control Bylaw, again a larger municipal agency within the province, and to look at some modern practices. So with that, we have a number of recommendations that we would like to begin work on to put together a new bylaw and fee schedule, present that to council for, I believe it's first reading, and to bring that legislation or bylaw forward. So with this is changes to the animal control bylaw itself and modernizing some of the language and some of the practices that we do. And as we look forward, we've had more and more requests about commercial animals or commercial, more in the area of different species that really shouldn't be within the city unless you're an agricultural area. So we're looking at bringing in a commercial animal bylaw, as well as it's not specifically outlined, so we thought we would start a prohibited animals bylaw, and really looking at, again, modernizing this and allowing our bylaw officers the proper authority to work within the legislation. So, subject to any questions, Your Worship.
Very good. And we'll open up the floor to questions of Chief Balkin, Councillor Desjardins, followed by Councillor Chaboyer.
Yes, so thank you, through your worship, to Chief Balkin, and I think that it's a great starting point here for your group and legislation and administration to take a look at this and cobble together these recommendations. I'm assuming that most of these recommendations would likely come to council in some form of bylaw, and then for us to decide whether or not we're going to go with them. So we don't really have to belabor this and have a big discussion over these recommendations today, I'm assuming. But I did have a question. Well, first off, I like the recommendations to the changes to the number of pets. We won't get into that, but it's a good recommendation. One of the ones that isn't in here, so I'm wondering if it was decided not to put it forward, was the possibility of going toward annual pet licensing. So I just know that it's not in there as a recommendation. It was something that I brought to council as an option. Just other municipalities had done that. It seemed like having an annual pet licensing option for some residents who've never licensed their pet. I won't mention any names, but I'm staring at one. Anyway, I'm just wondering if that was by design or if that's just didn't make it to the report.
Through your worship, to Councillor Desjardins, I believe it was addressed in the report that's put forward. We didn't consider a lifetime licensing. We did consider a 2-year cycle, and that was as a recommendation from some of the vet services, and most of the animal updated vaccinations are done on a 2-year cycle. So looking at the possibility of vet services implementing the license process as well, working with the city to allow a 2-year cycle. So when you bring your pet in for annual vaccinations or biannual, I guess it is, vaccinations, then the licensing could be looked at that time as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Chaboyer.
Thank you, Worship. I guess it's time to ruffle some feathers. This is a query that I get occasionally, and I know that our police service has gotten it too, about urban chickens. And I'm glad to see that you're looking closer at this as commercial animals and what's allowed. What I wanted to know, if you could investigate a little further what's happening in other urban cities on the chicken issue, because more and more there's a lot of folks into organic growing and having, and they would like to have their own chickens. And I know some cities are looking at this. I would like for you to kind of review this a bit further, a little deeper, to see what's going on in other cities, to see if chickens are being allowed. This query does come up from citizens occasionally, and I think that we need to look at it a little deeper to see if it's something that is doable in this community or not.
I will bring that back to the bylaw officers to take a look at further. I know we have lots of issues with the turkeys, so we might as well add chickens to the...
Absolutely, yeah, the feathers do come up.
I will say the timing is precarious. Oddly enough, but Councillor Chaboyer received a letter directly from the Minister of Agriculture about 2 weeks ago, and it was, vis-a-vis I think it's called the avian flu, significant impact on birds, and asking our municipality that if we have the provision for urban chickens, that we cease considering or granting any additional permits for the time being while this is being, so it is a thing, and it would be something that I think, if you would mind, Chief, then including the Department of Agriculture, who obviously are more attuned to this topic than we might be. So I think we would want to draw in the expertise of this. I wouldn't even have known this if it wasn't such a provincial issue, and the Minister of Agriculture was sending not exactly a cease and desist order, but it was we need everybody on board on this type of thing. So interesting
Thanks.
you brought
I think
that
it's
up.
important for us to probably discuss that, and even if they're allowed to have a permit,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and I see a hand over here. Councillor Fawcett, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, and through your worship. On Councillor Chaboyer's note there, if there is any entrepreneurs out there that are interested in that industry, I imagine you could set up free-range chicken farms just right outside of town where you could actually go out and have your own chickens, and it's not unheard of, and current pricing is probably done other places. So it is something to be looked at. Look at it in town. Should have a decent-sized yard. I grew up with chickens when I was young, so quite enjoyed it. My grandma would come out once a year and slaughter them. I never really picked that up. I was pretty young. When I did, it hurt. That example list of prohibited animals is one of the most entertaining lists I've ever read on a council agenda. And so what kind of timeline do we have to get rid of our jackals or polecats, kinkajous, or mongoose, if that is the case?
We would do that immediately.
Okay, all right, because it's a wonderful list. It's a fantastic list.
Okay, and Councillor Barry, who's next?
Thank you, Your Worship, through Chief Walken. Chief, I was looking just through the amendments in the bylaw there, or proposals, and it has to do with the dogs and cats in total number. You're allowed, was 2 dogs, 2 cats, now they're saying combination of both, which is fine. But there was also something in the old bylaws that said that somebody moving into town that had more than 4 animals, because they had animals at a previous residence, say it was in Carberry, and moved to Brandon, that they were allowed to keep them. Is that something that is going to stay in the bylaw, or are we sticking it to a maximum of 4 regardless?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Berry, I will have to get back to you on that. I know that there was amendments to allow people prior to 1990, I believe it was, at one point, that had more than 2 animals, and I'll have to
This
check
one
out.
was specifically for people that were moving into the city from another place that had more than the allowed animals that we are by bylaw here, so.
I will take a look at that and again have our supervisor of bylaw look into that question.
Appreciate that. I've actually had a couple of calls in previous years on that, so just curious as to whether that's going to change or stay the same, so.
Any other questions? I do agree with Councillor Foss. That is a excellent list. That itself was worth having. And many of those prohibitive have entered my home or yard. Squirrels, bats, deer in the yard. Not many bears yet, but we'll see. So, not sure if I'd be in violation if a squirrel or bat gets in. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you very much, Chief. Coming back to putting the motion on the floor, and I think Councillor Desjardins kind of hit this on the head. We won't be required to digest, to deliberate on all this now. If we have passed this, we're receiving the report and then asking administration to proceed with preparing the bylaw, at which point in time we'll have the opportunity to debate that. So you hit that on the head. So go ahead, Councillor Desjardins, if you want to make the motion.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. I move that the report to amend the animal control bylaw number 5900 be received, and further that the Brandon Police Service traffic bylaw section work with legislative services to prepare an updated animal control bylaw and fee schedule.
Seconder, please. Councillor Chaboyer. Any discussion? I think it's, although there might be a few humorous points to this, it is a significant issue. It could be a very large and detailed thing, and it's could be, well, it is extremely important to lots of people, and there will be some opinions out there on this. Just as the item Councillor Berry raised, sometimes the number of animals you can have, that's sometimes in the eye of the beholder. So we gotta. Okay, we ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
The tender for contract E1, which is the research station ditch.
Councillor Fawcett.
Yes, thank you. Through your worship, that the low bid submitted by Hodgson Construction Incorporated to carry out 2022 contract E1 research station ditch as per tender and specifications at a cost of $224,829.45 net of GST be accepted, and further that $250,000 be authorized to be expended from the Dike and Flooding Control Reserve for the project.
Seconder, please. Parker. Mover wish to speak? Not sure if we had anybody from administration that were wanting to speak on this one, but we can have questions answered if there are some, but go ahead.
I can give you a bit of a background. It is has been of some interest to people up on the North Hill there, so I'll just give you the quick backgrounder here. In 2013, a ditch along the west side of the Grand Valley Dike was constructed to divert flows from the east side of the new dike to the west side. This ensures that during severe rain events, drainage from the North Hill doesn't become trapped on the east side of the dike, while the dike closure is in place across Grand Valley Road. Significant pumping operations would have been required in 2014, 2017, and 2020 had flow not been diverted. And now, due to the June 28, 2020 rainfall event, the earthen berm at 18th Street North and Brayview collapsed and was washed downstream, filling in a large portion of the research station ditch. The heavy rain also eroded portions of the ditch. So this is now to get in there, regrade everything, install erosion protection, landscape, and reconstruct earthen berm at 18th Street North and Brayview Place. So for those that live up in that area, they're very aware of some of this stuff. So it's an important dike remediation thing. So yeah, there was 8 submissions, which is always a good amount of submissions. The low price was low. Hopefully that just means that there's lots of work for everybody out there. It's competitive, and assume that they should be able to get going on that shortly.
Very good. Any discussion? Councillor Parker.
Just quickly, I know our procurement department has done all their thing and is quite comfortable with it, but it's a big difference, $208,000 from top to bottom. One's almost double the other one. It's a little concerning in my mind that there might have been some confusion somewhere in the tender or something, but I trust our folks have done the proper thing and prepared to support this.
Yeah, I agree with you, other than there's kind of a gradient, like it just goes up and up and up and up and up, like there's some that are reasonably close to the low bid as well. So if they were all near the top end And just this one at the bottom, I'd be more concerned, but we have to have faith, as you say, in the process. So, any other questions? Ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Is the interim appointment to the Poverty Committee, Your Worship?
Councillor Lupke.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. I move that the following interim citizen appointment be and is hereby made to the Poverty Committee for a term of office to commence immediately and expire December 31st, 2023. Cinnamon Machascu.
Seconder, please. Councillor Chaboyer. Whoever wishes to speak.
Just briefly, we had one of our members of the Poverty Committee resign from the committee, and we went back to the applicants that had submitted their names in the fall, and Cinnamon was one of those, and is happy to have her come on board if it's council's wish to be the replacement.
Very good. Other discussion? She'll make an excellent addition to this committee. So, ready for the question then? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Is a request for proposals for the peer review and preparation of municipal servicing standards for the City of Brandon.
Very good. And again, I'd like to check whether there any administration going to be making. Okay. Same reason we have people here for hours and then just
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. The City is asking for additional funds in the total of $115,000 from the Capital Development Reserve to be in order to award the contract for municipal servicing standards. This approval is required as the only bidder exceeded the amount that was put forward in the 2022 budget. The goal of this assignment is to develop and finalize complementing municipal design standards and engineering design submission standards under the umbrella document of municipal servicing standards. These standards are important to the city, specifically the engineering and planning department, alongside the development community, as these provide specific guidelines for the design and construction of municipal linear infrastructure. These standards will not only benefit the city in the short term, but also serve the city well into the future. Working within and enforcing standards will also save the city money in the long run, as the servicing standards will provide or ensure that the city is provided with quality infrastructure that will meet an acceptable long-term life expectancy, minimize maintenance cost and life cycle cost associated with this infrastructure. It will also reduce turnaround times and the number of reviews during various stages of development. Without formalizing these standards, the design and approval processes already in place will continue to be very time-consuming and quite onerous on both city employees and the developers within the community. The engineering department will be completing the industrial engagement for this project, which will reduce the cost overall. Any questions?
Thank you very much. And just so the public knows that are watching on TV, this is Jennifer Cooey, one of our engineers, professional engineers in our engineering department. So thank you very much, Ms. Cooey. And any questions on this report? Councillor Barry and then Councillor Cameron.
Thanks. Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Ms. Cooey. This particular study, is this something that's going to be completed this year? Is this going to be a multi-year project, or is it going to be all completed and done this year?
Through Your Worship to the Councillor, this project is going to be primarily completed in 2022. However, it will fall into the first quarter of 2023. So go ahead.
So with that, Your Worship, my question that kind of leads into it is if that's the case, if it falls into 2023, do we have to expropriate all the funds from this year that we can maybe push some out to next year's budget, as opposed to dipping into the reserve and taking them all out this year?
Through Your Worship to the Councillor, the way this contract is set up, there is a fixed fee portion. There's about 6 tasks, and 3 of those are time plus disbursements. And so depending on where the project or how quickly it's proceeding, it's hard to know how much we will be invoicing in 2023. There will be a portion, but the exact amount will not be known until later in Q4.
Thank you.
I think on top of that, when we award a contract and we've taken on the liability for that, we have to be able to show that, the funds are there. Like, we wouldn't be able to say, well, we'll take our chances in next year's budget. We have to have allocated the funds, I guess. So that's what this motion would do. And Councillor Cameron?
Thank you, Your Worship. I had the same question as Councillor Barry, so we must have been on the same wavelength here.
Okay. Oddly enough, I had same question about just what the timeline was myself. Other questions? Councillor Fawcett?
Thank you, through your worship. So the expectation is having this completed does make things smoother for the industry and the city working together. That's the plan.
Through your worship to the councillor, having these standards, they will act as a guideline. So when developers hire a consultant to work on their behalf to design the infrastructure in the city, they'll understand what assumptions that have to be made when they're designing the work. So an example would be when it comes to wastewater servicing, there will be certain distances that they cannot get close to a water main or land drainage. So those distances will be known. Things like generation rates when it comes to wastewater, it will be a known assumption. We won't have consultation back and forth with the consultants that are working on it. It will also allow developers to know clear guidelines on what is an acceptable level of service to the city. So right now, without formalized standards, there's some of those gray areas where there's a lot of debate back and forth of what is acceptable, what would the city accept if we're maintaining this infrastructure going forward.
I could definitely see it serving that purpose. And then does it become a bit of a living document after that, though? Because 5 years in, it would change a little, possibly. Just if things change, or is it isn't etched in stone forever, or is that?
Your worship to the councillor, yes, it will be a living document. So periodically, we'll review the document. But if things are encountered year by year that pose a need to amend it or to make a revision, we will be doing that.
Good. Yeah, and glad you brought that up. I was going to bring it up as well. I know I've had numerous discussions over the years with developers. I think other councillors probably have as well, and they've often cited that is one of the things that kind of slows us down, both the city and the developers. We're just kind of back and forth, whereas in other jurisdictions, they'll have these development standards in place, and therefore everybody already kind of knows the expectations. We're not kind of reinventing the wheel every time. This is probably a poor analogy, but because I'm not in that sphere, but it would be like I'm guessing like curbs. Like we kind of have a standard what a curb needs to look like, and that's in there already. I think we do, and they're not having to come and negotiate each time they have to put in a curb and a sidewalk. I mean, we've got kind of a standard. So I'm guessing, that's what this is going to lead to. And I know that this is something that the developers have been, asking for, I believe, for many years, so that we just have a better, more sort of transparent system, kind of both ways. And to that end, is there a component in this of consultation of the industry? And obviously, when we talk about developers, they in turn have their consultants, who are obviously deeply in this industry, as would be the consultant that is being recommended here. So would we be, consulting with the industry, before we, sort of adopt this?
To your worship, the way this project is going to be set up is that the consultant assignment's only the first half. The second component is industry consultation, in which we're not asking for funds. That will be completed in-house. So what we're going to be doing is hopefully in 2023, ideally, we're hoping for a June 2023 start on consultation. And what will happen is we're doing a soft launch of the standards. So we will take what the city accepts from the consultants and we will roll it out to industry. We'll probably have a consultation session at first, just explaining how the standards came about. But then we will also be giving them a 1-year trial. So throughout that time, industry will be allowed to propose alterations or considerations during that time. And throughout that 1 year, the city will compile all the concerns. And prior to getting it adopted, we will be taking that feedback into consideration.
Good. Okay, other questions of Jennifer? Not seeing others. Well covered. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, what is council's wish? A motion would be in order, please. Councilor Fawcett.
Thank you, through your worship, that the bid submitted by Tetra Tech Canada Incorporated to carry out the peer review and preparation of municipal servicing standards for the City of Brandon as per the request for proposals at a cost of $213,425 net of GST be accepted, and further that $115,000 in additional funding be authorized to be expended from the Capital Development Reserve for the project.
Seconder, please. Councilor Parker. Mover wish to speak?
I think we had some good discussion there. I got a good understanding myself, and we had our questions answered well there, I think so.
Any other discussion? I would note that while this city manager and I did have a brief discussion, while it is a sizable sum of funds, it's a big project, it's important, would be kind of long lasting, and as Jennifer pointed out, it's some of the work is being done in-house, so they tried to find the most efficient ways of doing it. Bring in consultant for that very technical big piece that we probably need that additional expertise, and yet as much of it that they could do in-house, they're doing in-house to still keep the cost down. So if we'd have just farmed it all out, it would have been far more than this. So I applaud them for trying to find efficiencies everywhere they can. Any further discussion before we call the question? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Under the order of bylaws, Your Worship, bylaw number 7322, which is the Princess Downtown Priority Site Tax Increment Financing bylaw.
Councilor Desjardins.
Thank you, through Your Worship. I move that the Princess Downtown Priority Site Tax Increment Financing bylaw number 7322 be read a second time.
Seconder, please. Councilor Cameron. Whoever wishes to speak.
I don't know if I need to at this point. Do we? I guess we could do it now or the third reading. I'm just going to make some.
Well, we usually have the most discussion in second reading.
So let's just have the discussion. I'll make some comments now that I thought the Brandon Downtown Development Corp's director laid it out very clearly for us earlier that we're struggling with getting the development going on this area in our downtown. That it's part of the solution to our downtown challenges. It's a bit like a heart transplant. Like we kind of need something down there. It's been an eyesore, and people must go down there and go, what's happening? When's something going to happen? And this is just one of the many solutions that we need to consider to create the incentives for developers to take a chance on this area of the downtown. So it's one of the tools that we can use, and hopefully, I'm certainly in favor of it. Hopefully, council sees it the same way.
Okay, open up the floor. Councilor Fawcett, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. We had good discussion on this. I do think it is a good thing to try to do this. I think it's important. We did spend a fair bit of money compiling that property between the two different organizations, the city and the Renaissance Brandon at the time. However, kind of wearing my multiple foundation hats, that money we invested in it is currently just sitting there as dead money, doing nothing. And as long as it sits there doing nothing, it is useless to us. So this actually gives it an opportunity to become something. It is long-term. We will notice, hopefully we get some good response to this, but we would notice the work right away, and it could change the dynamics of downtown in a certain area there quite drastically into the positive, and the taxes would come in time with that, hopefully picked up on other areas as well. So I think that considering we've got that dead money sitting there, we may as well capitalize on it and use it.
Thank you. And myself down next, and that kind of segue from that. And earlier in the discussion, I know there was questions by a couple of other councillors in terms of, did we have to go for the full 20, and could it have been 10 for a TIF, or or could it maybe 10 and then we start to graduate the next 10, and and I was almost feeling like I had more of an appetite for something a little less than the full 20, like 100% of full 20, and then kind of reconsidering that such as what Councillor Fawcett said, and like lots of times in business, you learn that your first loss is your easiest loss. You just kind of get on with it, and to me that's what we'd be doing here. And how I view this really is that, and as Councillor Desjarlais said, like a kind of a heart transplant. We're at a crossroads with our downtown. We're having some struggles. Obviously we're coming at this every which way. We had the Downtown Wellness and Safety Task Force report, and we passed some great initiatives there, with more to come. We started in on conversations about the library, art gallery, museum, kind of cultural center that that could be another profound impact on downtown. Certainly this is another very significant thing that could be quite a game changer. And so I look at this, looking at this now, less as, when are we getting paid back, or, or when are we going to start collecting taxes on this thing, as what will happen if we don't? What will the impact be on all of that other tax base that is probably already declining, and we need to stem the tide and get that turned around. Something like this, it may be kind of invisible, like, a council 10 years from now, oh my God, these clowns gave that away, we're not collecting any taxes forevermore. But if this goes and we get a project and we get something built down there, I think that will solidify and probably start to raise the taxes on all the rest of the properties, and will have done the community a favor by keeping our arms wrapped around that. So I've kind of changed my own mind that I'm prepared to go with the recommendation administration has had, and I think we've got a strong chance of attracting a developer and all the things, with the $1 price tag, the 20-year TIF. It's not completely a slam dunk, but I feel we will get something, and if we do, it will be a significant boon to downtown. So personally, I'm going to be voting in favor of the motion as it's presented, but I did want to acknowledge that I had the same quandary and contemplation of looking at an amendment as some of the rest of you, but I've got to change my own mind. So. Others? Councillor Chaboy.
I'm going to support this resolution. I think this is great catalyst for our marketing plan to develop an important piece of property. There was a lot of interest prior to COVID, and we're getting out of the COVID thing now, and I think something could happen. So I don't think we're being clowns around the table making this happen. I have faith in having a robust downtown, and it's starting already with some of our plans for the Library Arts Cultural Center, and we've got to do what we got to do. So I'm in support of it.
Thank you. Other discussion? You look like you're shaping up to say something.
I was just going to say, we won't be calling you guys clowns in 10 years.
Sorry, Councillor Cullen, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a tough one for me, because it did take us quite a bit of monies in order to, and time to, gather this land up. And we did have high expectations of what it was going to do, because we had this project that was going to be educational based and with Brandon University, and that's not going to happen. So when I think about it and sort of started to, sort of weigh everything out, is like the project that I really liked is not going to happen. So that's done. It's over. So now what we have is we have a piece of property. Yes, we own that piece of property, but absolutely nothing is happening. So we need to, nothing happening is not an option for us. We need to be able to turn this corner and lick our wounds and go back and see what else we can do with the tools that we've got in front of us. So it's like, again, what we did back then was the right plan, trying to get that together, and we gave it our college try, and the thing didn't work out. So now we've got a vacant piece of land with no interest, so we need to turn that around. So if we can get a new building built on that and start building on that as another option, well, we're kind of just sort of switching gears here and going to come at it from another direction, and I'm willing to support this. And because again, 10 years from now, if we go back and it's still a piece of vacant land, well, we haven't advanced the ball at all. So let's see what we can do with this and make it happen, or make something happen.
Anybody else? Okay, I think we're ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Third reading would be in order. Councillor Desjardins, if you like.
Thank you. Are these all the same, or is this two separate things that we're?
So there's third reading and then
And the
adoption of the regulations, a separate motion.
Okay. Thank you. Through your worship, I move that the bylaw be read a third and final time.
Seconder, please. Councillor Chaboyer. Any further discussion? Again, as it's third reading, a recorded vote is required. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And that next motion, go ahead, please.
Thank you, through your worship. I move that the regulation to establish pre-approved site-specific conditions, Site Reg 001, to support bylaw number 7322 be approved, and further, that administration be authorized to execute the associated agreements required to protect the city's interests in accordance with any procedures, policies, bylaws, and acts.
Seconder, please. Councillor Lupke. Any discussion? It's more of a formality that supports the bylaw. Ready for the question then? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. It's I think an important piece of legislation, and I wish our administration best of luck in making this happen. It's a good job on that, Ryan, and your team. Next item, please.
Bylaw number 7335, which is an amendment to the tree protection bylaw regarding some housekeeping amendments and clarification of some terms.
Councillor Fawcett.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. The bylaw number 7335 to amend the tree protection bylaw number 7285 to clarify terms of general housekeeping amendments be read a first time.
Seconded by Councillor Parker. First reading, question on the table, not usually debatable, so we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, please.
Giving of notice, your worship.
Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Worship. Give notice tonight to have the Traffic Authority Advisory Committee evaluate the need for extending the 48-hour parking prohibition and develop recommendations for expanding the residential parking permit program.
Thank you. Any other giving of notice? Seeing none. Next item, please.
A motion to adjourn would be in order, your worship.
Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Chaboyer. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried.
My three kids.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Music lesson.